The Mercedes plunged through the guardrail like a meteor falling from heaven, its headlights carving twin arcs through the storm before disappearing into the Black River below. Daniel Hayes had exactly 3 seconds to decide drive past like everyone else would, or dive into those churning waters after a complete stranger. 3 seconds that would shatter everything he thought he knew about fate, fortune, and the price of doing the right thing. Friends settle in for a story that proves sometimes the poorest among us possess the richest hearts. And hey, drop a comment with your city. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled tonight. The rain hammered against Daniel Hayes' windshield with the fury of 1,000 angry fists, each drop exploding into silver fragments that blurred the world beyond recognition. His 2003 Honda Civic groaned with every gust of wind that swept across Riverbend Bridge, the old suspension creaking like arthritic joints. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, his calloused hands aching from another 12-hour shift at Morrison Manufacturing, where he operated the same metal press that had claimed 2 of his fingers 8 years ago, back when safety regulations were more suggestion than requirement. "Just get home," he muttered to himself, squinting through the storm. "Maya's got that science project due tomorrow, and Lily needs her lunch money for the field trip." The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. in sickly green digits. Another late night, another missed bedtime story, another broken promise to his daughters that he'd be there to tuck them in. The weight of single parenthood pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than any industrial machinery, a burden he'd carried alone for 3 years now, ever since cancer had stolen Rebecca from their lives with the same ruthless efficiency that poverty stole dreams. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the bridge in stark photographic clarity for one brilliant moment. That's when Daniel saw it, a black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the kind of car that cost more than he'd make in 5 years hydroplaning across 3 lanes of traffic. Time seemed to crystallize each second, stretching like heated glass as the luxury vehicle spun in an elegant, deadly ballet toward the bridge's edge. The driver he could just make out a woman's silhouette fought for control, her hands wrestling with the wheel as the car's rear end swung wide. But physics had already written the ending to this story. The Mercedes struck the guardrail at 60 miles per hour, the metal barrier crumpling like aluminum foil. For one impossible moment, the car seemed to hover at the edge, balanced between safety and disaster, its xenon headlights blazing into the void. Then it was gone. The splash was audible even over the storm's rage, a sound that punched through Daniel's chest and grabbed his heart with icy fingers. Without conscious thought, his foot slammed the brake pedal. The Civic skidded to a stop, its worn tires screaming against wet asphalt. 3 other cars swept past him, their drivers either oblivious or unwilling to acknowledge what had just happened. In this city, in this economy, people had learned to mind their own business, to keep their heads down and their problems small. But Daniel Hayes had never learned that lesson. He was out of his car before his brain could catalog all the reasons this was insane. The rain struck him like a physical assault, instantly soaking through his faded Morrison Manufacturing uniform. The name Danny was still visible on the breast pocket embroidered there by Rebecca's careful hands years ago when the world had been kinder and possibilities had seemed endless. Daniel sprinted to the twisted gap in the guardrail, his work boots splashing through puddles that reflected the bridge's sodium lights like pools of liquid gold. 40 feet below the river churned with spring runoff, swollen and angry from 3 days of torrential rain. The Mercedes was already listing to one side, its elegant lines disappearing beneath the black water. The headlights still blazed beneath the surface, twin beacons of fading hope. Son of a... Daniel didn't finish the curse. He was already climbing over the jagged metal, feeling it tear through his pants and bite into his thigh. The pain was distant, unimportant. All that mattered was the rapidly shrinking pocket of air inside that sinking tomb of German engineering. The fall lasted forever, and an instant simultaneously. Daniel had time to think about his daughters, Maya, 15, and brilliant with her mother's eyes and his stubborn streak. Lily, 11, and fearless, who still believed her daddy could fix anything. He thought about the half-finished homework on the kitchen table, the overdue electric bill, the parent-teacher conference he'd have to miss next week, because Morris wouldn't give him the time off. Then the river swallowed him whole. The cold was beyond description, a savage, crushing force that drove every molecule of air from his lungs and tried to stop his heart mid-beat. The current grabbed him immediately, spinning him in the darkness until up and down became meaningless concepts. But those headlights, those blessed beautiful headlights, gave him direction. Daniel forced his numbing limbs to move, swimming with the desperate strength of a man who had too much to live for to die in this muddy grave. The Mercedes had hit the river roof first, flipping in its descent. Now it sat upright on the riverbed, 10 feet down and sinking deeper. The electric system was failing, the lights flickering like dying stars. Daniel dove, his lungs already screaming from the cold and effort. Through the driver's side window he saw her. Isabella Carter, though he didn't know her name yet, was trapped in a pocket of air that grew smaller with each passing second. Her designer dress, something that probably cost more than his monthly rent, floated around her like dark silk. Blood traced a delicate line from a gash on her forehead, the red dissolving into the murky water. But her eyes, God, her eyes were alive with terror and determination in equal measure. She wasn't screaming or panicking. She was fighting, pulling at her seatbelt with manicured nails that were already torn and bleeding. Their eyes met through the glass barrier, and something passed between them, a recognition that transcended social class and circumstance. In that moment, she wasn't a millionaire, and he wasn't a factory worker. They were just two human beings separated by 3 inches of German automotive glass and united by the most primal of all equations, life or death. Daniel grabbed the door handle and pulled. Nothing. The water pressure held it sealed better than any lock. The car continued its descent, the hood now tilting upward as water flooded the engine compartment. Isabella's air pocket shrank to mere inches. She pressed her face to the ceiling, gasping at the last precious oxygen. "Hold on!" Daniel shouted, though the words were lost in a burst of bubbles. He swam to the surface, his lungs feeling like they might explode. One desperate breath, then down again. This time he had a plan, or at least the ghost of one. His steel-toed boot, the same one that had protected his feet through countless factory shifts, became a battering ram. Daniel planted himself against the car's frame and drove his heel into the passenger window. Once, twice. The safety glass was designed to resist impact to protect occupants from flying debris. It wasn't designed to withstand the desperate fury of a father who understood what it meant to fight for someone else's life. On the third strike, the glass exploded inward in a shower of cubic fragments that glittered in the dying headlights like diamonds. Water rushed into the cabin with violent force, and Isabella was thrown against her seatbelt. Daniel pulled himself through the window, feeling the glass fragments tear at his arms and chest. The pain was nothing. Pain was for later. Pain was for the living. Inside the flooded cabin, he found Isabella unconscious, her body limp against the restraints. The seatbelt release wouldn't budge, the mechanism jammed from the impact. Daniel's knife, the folding buck that Rebecca had given him for their 5th anniversary, was in his hand without conscious thought. The blade, kept sharp enough to slice paper, parted the seatbelt like it was made of cobwebs. Isabella's body drifted free, and Daniel caught her, pulling her against his chest. She was so light, or maybe adrenaline made everything light. He kicked off from the driver's seat, propelling them both through the shattered window. His lungs were on fire now, every cell in his body screaming for oxygen. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision as he swam upward, Isabella's dead weight threatening to drag them both into the abyss. They broke the surface together, Daniel gasping air, like a drowning man reborn. Isabella remained limp in his arms, her face pale as porcelain in the intermittent lightning. The current had carried them 50 yards downstream from the bridge. Daniel could hear sirens now. Someone had finally called 911. But they were still in the middle of the river, and Isabella wasn't breathing. "No, no, no," Daniel panted, trying to keep them both afloat while tilting her head back. "You don't get to die on me. Not after all that." He managed to get them to a concrete pylon, part of the old railway bridge that ran parallel to the road. There was a maintenance ledge there, barely 2 feet wide and slick with algae, but it was enough. Daniel hauled Isabella onto it, his muscles trembling from exhaustion and cold. Her lips were blue, her chest still. "Come on." He started chest compressions, pumping with the rhythm Rebecca's oncology nurse had taught him, the same rhythm he'd used trying to bring his wife back that final morning before the ambulance arrived. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4? Nothing. "Breathe, damn it." He pinched her nose, sealed his mouth over hers, and forced air into her lungs. Her lips were cold as winter frost. More compressions. More breath. The sirens were closer now, but not close enough. Never close enough when death was measured in seconds. On the third cycle, Isabella convulsed. River water erupted from her lungs in a violent fountain, and she rolled onto her side, coughing and retching. Daniel supported her, keeping her from sliding back into the river, his relief so profound it made him dizzy. "That's it," he murmured, rubbing her back as she expelled what seemed like half the river. "Get it all out. You're okay. You're alive." Isabella's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. They were green. He noticed the color of spring leaves with flecks of gold that caught the emergency lights now painting the bridge above them. She tried to speak, but only managed more coughing. "Don't talk," Daniel said. "Help's coming. Just breathe." She looked at him, then really looked at him, and her hand found his. Her grip was weak but insistent. "You," she managed between gasps. "You saved—" "Shh. Save your strength." But Isabella Carter, even half-drowned and hypothermic, was not a woman accustomed to being told what to do. "Thank you," she forced out each word of victory against her abused lungs. The rescue boat reached them 5 minutes later, though it felt like hours. Paramedics wrapped them both in thermal blankets and started IVs asking rapid-fire questions that Daniel could barely process. His body was beginning to register the damage, now the gashes from the guardrail and window, the hypothermia setting in, the complete exhaustion that made his bones feel like they were made of lead. "Sir, we need to get you to the hospital," one of the paramedics said, a young woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. "You're bleeding pretty badly and your core temperature is dangerously low." "My daughters," Daniel mumbled through chattering teeth. "Someone needs to. They're home alone." "We'll have someone contact them, sir. What's your name, Wopwa?" Daniel Hayes." On the other stretcher, Isabella was more alert now, an oxygen mask over her face, but her eyes tracking everything. When she heard his name, she turned her head, fighting against the cervical collar they'd placed as a precaution. "Daniel Hayes." She repeated, her voice muffled by the mask, but clear enough. I need to know." "Ma'am, please don't move," her paramedic said. "You could have spinal injuries." Isabella ignored him, her green eyes locked on Daniel's brown ones. "Your information, please. I owe you everything." Daniel wanted to tell her she owed him nothing, that anyone would have done the same. But that was a lie, wasn't it? 3 other cars had driven past, in a world where everyone was struggling to keep their own head above water. Metaphorically speaking, he'd been the only one willing to dive into literal drowning waters for a stranger. "Morrison Manufacturing," he said as they loaded him into the ambulance. "I work the night shift." Isabella nodded once, a gesture that somehow contained a promise, then let the paramedics minister to her. As the ambulance doors closed, Daniel caught a glimpse of the river through the rain-streaked windows. The Mercedes headlights had finally died, leaving nothing but darkness where tragedy had almost claimed another victim. The ride to Riverside General was a blur of medical terminology and vital signs. Daniel's mind kept drifting to his daughters. Mrs. Chen from next door was watching them, but she'd be worried by now. He should have been home an hour ago. The paramedic, her name tag said Jennifer, kept him talking, probably to keep him from sliding into shock. "You did something incredible tonight," she said, adjusting his IV drip. "That woman would be dead if not for you." "Just did what anyone would do," Daniel mumbled, though they both knew that wasn't true. "Most people would have called 911 and watched from the bridge. You risked your life for a complete stranger." Daniel thought about Rebecca, about how she'd faced her cancer with such grace and courage, about how she'd made him promise to keep being the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who did the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "My wife," he said, not sure why he was telling this stranger. "She died 3 years ago, cancer. Before she went, she made me promise to teach our girls that people matter, that we're all in this together. How could I face them if I'd just driven past?" Jennifer squeezed his shoulder gently. "Your wife sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was." Daniel closed his eyes, seeing Rebecca's face in his mind, not as she'd been at the end ravaged by chemo and radiation, but as she'd been on their wedding day, radiant with joy and possibility. "She really was." At the hospital, they rolled him into the emergency department, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness of the night. He could hear Isabella being brought in behind him, her voice stronger now, asking questions and making demands. Even half dead, she had the tone of someone accustomed to being in charge. "I need a phone," she was saying. "I need to call my office. There are things that need to be—" "Ma'am, it's past midnight," a nurse said patiently. "And you nearly drowned. The office can wait." "You don't understand. I have responsibilities. There are people depending on—" Her voice faded as they took her to a different treatment room. Daniel found himself oddly disappointed. In those intense moments in the river, he'd felt connected to her in a way that defied explanation. Now returned to the regular world with its regular boundaries, she was just another rich person whose life had briefly intersected with his. Dr. Patel, the emergency physician who treated Daniel, was thorough and professional. 17 stitches for the gash on his thigh, 8 more for his arms. Antibiotics for the river water he'd swallowed. Warming blankets and heated IV fluids for the hypothermia. Blood tests to check for infection or contamination. "You're lucky," Dr. Patel said, reviewing his chart. "A few more minutes in that water, and we'd be having a different conversation. The human body isn't designed for that kind of cold stress." "Will I be able to work tomorrow?" Daniel asked. "I mean, today. My shift starts at noon." Dr. Patel looked at him like he'd suggested running a marathon. "Mr. Hayes, you nearly died tonight. You need at least a week of rest, possibly more. Those wounds need time to heal, and your body needs to recover from the trauma." "I can't miss a week of work. I've got bills, kids to feed." "You also have a body that's been through severe trauma. If you don't let it heal, you could end up with complications that keep you out of work even longer." Daniel wanted to argue, but he knew the doctor was right. He also knew that Morrison Manufacturing had a strict attendance policy. A week off without proper documentation would mean termination. And in this economy, in this town, factory jobs weren't exactly growing on trees. "Could you write me a note?" he asked. "Something official that explains why I can't work." "Of course, I'll make sure it's thoroughly documented. You saved someone's life tonight, Mr. Hayes. Any employer worth their salt should understand that." Daniel didn't bother explaining that Mr. Morrison's salt came from the tears of his workers. The man had once fired a woman for missing 3 days when her son was in the ICU. Compassion wasn't part of the Morrison Manufacturing business model. A knock on the door interrupted his dark thoughts. A woman entered, not a nurse or doctor, but someone in an expensive suit that had somehow remained immaculate despite the late hour. She was in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Hayes? My name is Margaret Stern. I'm Ms. Carter's chief of staff." "Ms. Carter." "Isabella Carter, the woman you pulled from the river. She's asked me to check on you and ensure you're receiving the best possible care." Daniel struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "I'm fine. The doctors here are taking good care of me." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "She also wanted me to give you this." She handed him a business card, heavy stock embossed lettering. "Isabella Carter, CEO, Carter Innovations. She'd like to speak with you when you're both feeling better. And she asked me to ensure your family is taken care of tonight. Is there anyone who needs to be notified about your condition?" "My daughters, they're with the neighbor, but if you give me the address, I'll have someone check on them immediately. We can arrange for extended childcare if needed or transportation to visit you here." Daniel stared at the card, running his thumb over the raised letters. Carter Innovations. Even he had heard of them. They were the biggest tech company in the state, pioneering medical devices that were revolutionizing healthcare, the kind of company that factory workers like him only saw in newspaper headlines about billion-dollar valuations. "That's very kind, but we're managing fine." He said, his pride rising like a defensive wall. Margaret studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I understand, but please keep the card. Miss Carter takes her debt seriously, and she considers what you did tonight to be a debt that can never fully be repaid. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, you call that number." After she left, Daniel held the card up to the harsh hospital light. Such a small thing, but it felt heavy with possibility. Or maybe that was just the exhaustion talking. His eyes were getting heavy, the adrenaline finally fading and leaving only bone-deep weariness in its wake. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and two familiar faces were peering at him with barely contained panic. "Dad!" Maya's voice cracked with relief as she threw herself against his chest, forgetting about his injuries until he winced. "Oh God, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" "Mrs. Chen saw the news and she said you were in an accident and—" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Daniel said, wrapping his less injured arm around her. "Just a little banged up." Lily hung back her 11-year-old face, trying to be brave, but her eyes brimming with tears. "The news said you saved someone. They said you jumped off the bridge." "I didn't jump off the bridge," Daniel clarified, pulling her into the hug with his other arm, ignoring the protest from his stitches. "I climbed down to help someone whose car went into the river." "Like a superhero," Lily whispered, and for a moment Daniel saw himself reflected in his daughter's eyes, not as the exhausted single father who could barely make ends meet, but as someone capable of extraordinary things. "More like a regular person who couldn't drive past someone in trouble," he said, kissing the top of her head. Her hair smelled like the strawberry shampoo Rebecca used to buy, the expensive kind he still splurged on, because it kept her mother's memory alive in small ways. Maya pulled back her 15-year-old pragmatism, asserting itself. "Dad, Mr. Morrison called the house. He said if you're not at work today, you're fired." The words hit Daniel like cold water. He'd expected it, but hearing it confirmed still stung. 8 years at that factory. 8 years of perfect attendance until tonight, and Morrison couldn't even wait until business hours to terminate him. "It's okay," he lied. "We'll figure something out." "How?" Maya demanded, her mother's fire flashing in her eyes. "The rent's due next week. The electric company already sent a final notice. And Lily needs new shoes for gym class because her old ones literally have holes in them." "Maya," Daniel said gently. "Not in front of—" "I'm not a baby," Lily interrupted. "I know we're poor. Everyone at school knows we're poor. That's why I didn't tell you about the field trip to the Science Museum. It's $50, and I knew we didn't have it." Daniel's heart broke a little more, a feat he wouldn't have thought possible. His daughters shouldn't have to worry about money. They should be thinking about boys and homework and what videos to watch on YouTube, not whether their father could afford to keep the lights on. "Listen to me, both of you," he said, pulling them close again. "Being poor isn't something to be ashamed of. We have each other, we have our home, and we have our dignity. Your mother and I—" "Mom would have jumped in that river too," Maya said quietly. "Even if it meant leaving us, because that's who you both were. Are. The kind of people who help." Daniel had to close his eyes against the sudden burn of tears. "Yeah," he managed. "She would have." They stayed like that for a while, the three of them holding each other in the sterile hospital room while the world outside continued its relentless spin. Finally, a knock interrupted their family moment. Dr. Patel entered, followed by someone Daniel didn't expect to see. Isabella Carter stood in the doorway wearing a hospital gown and robe, but somehow making them look elegant. Her forehead was bandaged, and she moved carefully, but her green eyes were clear and intensely focused. Margaret Stern stood behind her, looking disapproving of her boss's ambulatory adventure. "Miss Carter, you should be in bed," Dr. Patel said, his tone suggesting this wasn't the first time he'd made this recommendation. "I'll rest when I've done what needs to be done," Isabella replied, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made arguing seem pointless. She looked at Daniel's daughters, and her expression softened. "You must be Maya and Lily. Your father told me about you in the ambulance, though I'm not sure he remembers. He was quite insistent that someone check on you." Lily, never one to be shy, stepped forward. "Are you the lady my dad saved?" "I am." Isabella moved into the room, her movements careful but determined. "And I owe him, and by extension you, a debt I can never fully repay." "We don't need—" Daniel started, but Isabella held up a hand. "Mr. Hayes, I understand you were terminated from your position at Morrison Manufacturing because of last night's events. How did you—" "I make it my business to know things," Isabella said simply. "It's how I've built my company." "It's also how I know you're a single father, that your wife Rebecca passed away 3 years ago from complications related to breast cancer, that you've been working double shifts to cover medical debts, and that you have an engineering degree from State University that you've never been able to use because you had to take the first job available when Rebecca got sick. Daniel felt exposed, vulnerable. You investigated me. I investigated the man who risked everything to save a stranger, Isabella corrected. And I found someone remarkable, someone who deserves better than being discarded by a small-minded factory owner who can't recognize heroism when it literally makes the morning news. She turned to Maya and Lily. Your father didn't just save my life last night. He gave me something I'd lost faith that there are still people in this world who do the right thing without calculating the cost. That's rarer than you might think, especially in my world. Ms. Carter. Daniel said, his voice tight. We appreciate your gratitude, but I'm offering you a job, Isabella interrupted. At Carter Innovations, we're developing a new medical device, something that could revolutionize emergency trauma care. I need someone on my team who understands what it means to make split-second decisions when lives are on the stake. Someone with engineering training and real-world experience. The room went silent. Even Lily, who usually had something to say about everything, seemed stunned. Daniel's mind struggled to process what he was hearing. A job at Carter Innovations. That was like offering a minor league baseball player a starting position with the Yankees. I'm not qualified, he said automatically. My degree is 8 years old. I haven't kept up with the technology. You pulled me from a sinking car in a freezing river at night, Isabella said. That tells me everything I need to know about your qualifications. The rest can be learned. What can't be taught is character, and you've already proven you have that in abundance. Maya grabbed Daniel's hand. Dad, you have to take it. It's not that simple, honey. There are considerations. The starting salary is $90,000 a year, Isabella said as casually as if discussing the weather. Full medical and dental benefits, flexible hours to accommodate your family responsibilities, and a signing bonus of $20,000 to help with any immediate financial pressures. Daniel couldn't breathe. $90,000. He made $32,000 at the factory, and that was with overtime. The signing bonus alone would clear their debts and leave enough for an emergency fund, something they hadn't had since Rebecca's illness drained their savings. Why? He asked, needing to understand. You could hire anyone. Why me? Isabella moved closer, and for a moment the CEO facade cracked, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. Because when I was drowning in that car, convinced I was about to die, you appeared like some kind of guardian angel. You didn't know who I was. For all you knew, I could have been anyone, a criminal, an addict, someone who'd made terrible choices. But you came anyway. She paused, seeming to gather herself. My father built Carter Innovations from nothing. He always said that a company is only as good as its people, and that the best people are those who understand that success isn't just about profit, it's about purpose. You have purpose, Mr. Hayes. I want that purpose working for my company. Can we come too? Lily asked suddenly. To the company I want to see where Dad would work. Isabella smiled, the expression transforming her face from corporate executive to something warmer, more human. Of course. In fact, Carter Innovations has an excellent internship program for high school students. She looked at Maya. If you're interested in science or technology, we'd be happy to have you apply when the time comes. Maya's eyes went wide. Really? Really? We believe in investing in the next generation. Your father saved my life, but you and your sister are his life. That makes you important to me as well. Daniel looked at his daughters, seeing the hope in their faces, hope that had been dimmed by 3 years of struggle and loss. Then he looked at Isabella Carter, this woman who'd literally fallen into his life and was now offering to change it completely. When would I start? He heard himself ask. Isabella's smile widened. As soon as you're medically cleared, Dr. Patel suggests a week of recovery. I'd prefer 2 weeks paid, of course, to ensure you're fully healed. Margaret will handle all the paperwork and arrange for movers to help if you need to relocate closer to our offices. Movers? Daniel was still trying to catch up. Our main campus is in Riverside Corporate Park. The commute from your current address would be over an hour each way. We have several corporate housing options available, or I can have my real estate team help you find something suitable. The signing bonus should cover any deposits or moving expenses. It was too much too fast. Daniel felt like he was drowning again, but this time in possibility rather than river water. I need to think about this. Of course. Isabella reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a card identical to the one Margaret had given him earlier. Take all the time you need. But Mr. Hayes, Daniel, please understand that this isn't charity. This isn't pity or some misguided sense of obligation. I'm offering you this position because I believe you'll be an asset to my company. The fact that you saved my life just means I got to see your character before a traditional interview would have revealed it. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Mr. Morrison, the owner of your former workplace. He'll be receiving a call from my legal team regarding wrongful termination. Colorado law protects employees who miss work due to emergency situations, especially those involving the preservation of human life. I believe the penalties can be quite substantial. That's not necessary, Daniel started. Yes, Isabella said firmly. It is. People like Morrison thrive because no one holds them accountable. Consider it my first lesson in your new position. Never let anyone get away with doing the wrong thing when you have the power to stop them. After she left the room, felt smaller somehow, as if her presence had expanded the walls and her absence had let them contract again. Daniel's daughters were both staring at him with expressions of awe and excitement. Dad, Maya said slowly, did you just get offered a job that pays 3 times what you were making? I think so, Daniel said, still not quite believing it himself. And did she just say she was going to sue Mr. Morrison? I think so. Lily bounced on her toes. This is the best day ever. Well, except for you almost dying. That part was terrible, but the rest is amazing. Daniel pulled them both close again, breathing in the reality of his family, of their continued existence together, despite everything life had thrown at them. Your mom would have been proud, he murmured. She is proud, Maya corrected. Wherever she is, she's proud. Dr. Patel returned a few minutes later to check Daniel's vitals and change his bandages. Ms. Carter is quite a force of nature, he observed. She's already arranged for you to have a private room for your recovery, and she's insisted on covering all medical expenses not handled by insurance. She doesn't need to do that. Try telling her that, Dr. Patel said with a wry smile. I've been her physician for 5 years, and I've never once won an argument with her. The woman could negotiate with death itself and probably get a better deal. As if to prove his point, Margaret Stern appeared again, this time with a tablet and a stack of paperwork. Mr. Hayes, I've taken the liberty of preparing the employment contracts for your review. I've also arranged for a car service to take your daughters home whenever they're ready, and I've had groceries delivered to your apartment so you don't need to worry about shopping when you're discharged. That's really not necessary, Margaret finished. Perhaps not, but Ms. Carter was quite specific in her instructions. She said, and I quote, "That man dove into a freezing river without hesitation. The least we can do is make sure his children don't have to worry about dinner." She handed him the tablet. The employment contract is straightforward, but I recommend having a lawyer review it. If you don't have one, we can provide a referral to an independent attorney who can advise you. Daniel looked at the contract, the numbers still seeming surreal. But it wasn't just the salary that caught his attention. It was the job description. Senior Engineering Consultant, Trauma Response Division. They were creating a position specifically for him built around his unique combination of technical knowledge and real-world experience. This division, he said, what exactly would I be doing? Margaret's professional demeanor warmed slightly. Ms. Carter has been developing what she calls the Lifeline Project, a portable medical device that can stabilize trauma patients in the field. The problem has been that the engineers designing it have never actually been in true emergency situations. They're brilliant, but they design for ideal conditions. You would bring practical experience to the team, helping them understand what first responders and civilians actually need when every second counts. Like last night, Maya said quietly. Dad would help them design things for people like him who have to make decisions when everything's going wrong. Exactly, Margaret confirmed. Your father's experience, both his technical training and his practical heroism, makes him uniquely qualified for this role. Daniel signed the contract before he could talk himself out of it. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe he should have had someone review it first, but something in his gut told him this was right. This was the opportunity Rebecca would have wanted him to take the chance to use his education and experience to make a real difference. Excellent, Margaret said, taking the tablet back. I'll have it set up your company email and send you information about orientation. In the meantime, focus on recovering. Ms. Carter is serious about you taking at least 2 weeks to heal properly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of visitors and phone calls. The story had made not just local but national news. Factory worker risks life to save tech CEO. And suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Daniel. He declined all interview requests, having no interest in becoming a media sensation. But he couldn't avoid everyone. His supervisor from Morrison Manufacturing, Ted Rawlings, called to personally apologize. Danny, I'm so sorry about what happened. Morrison's decision, not mine. You know I'd keep you if I could. It's okay, Ted, Daniel said, meaning it. Ted was a good man trapped in a bad system. I've actually got something else lined up. Already? That's fantastic. Where? Carter Innovations. The silence on the other end was so long, Daniel thought the call had dropped. Then Ted whistled low. Holy shit, Danny! From the factory floor to Carter Innovations, that's like going from the minor leagues straight to the World Series. It's just a job, Daniel said, though he knew it was more than that. No, it's not, Ted said. It's a chance. Don't waste it. That evening, as visiting hours were ending and his daughters reluctantly prepared to leave with the car service Margaret had arranged, Isabella Carter appeared one more time. She moved more easily now, though, still carefully, and she'd changed into regular clothes, designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. I wanted to check on you before I'm discharged, she said, and to thank you again. You've thanked me enough, Daniel said. More than enough. The job offer is a business decision, Isabella interrupted, but this is personal. She pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down, her green eyes serious. I need to tell you something about last night, about why I was on that bridge. Daniel waited, sensing this was important. I was coming back from visiting my father's grave, she said quietly. It was the 10th anniversary of his death. He built Carter Innovations from nothing, and I've spent every day since trying to live up to his legacy. But lately I've been wondering if I've lost sight of what he really wanted to build. Not just a successful company, but one that made a difference. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I've been so focused on profit margins and market share that I'd forgotten why we started the medical device division in the first place. My father had a heart attack at 55. The ambulance took too long, the field treatment was inadequate, and he died before reaching the hospital. He might have lived if the emergency response had been better equipped. I'm sorry, Ed, Daniel said, understanding now why the Lifeline project was so important to her. Last night when I was trapped in that car, I thought about him. I thought about how I was going to die the same way because help couldn't reach me in time. And then you appeared. She met his eyes. You weren't a trained rescue worker. You didn't have special equipment. You were just a man with the courage to act when it mattered. That's what the Lifeline project needs, someone who understands that emergencies aren't clean, controlled situations. They're chaos, and the tools we design need to work in chaos. I'll do my best, Daniel promised. I know you will. Isabella stood. One more thing. My head of security pulled the footage from the bridge cameras. 3 cars passed before you stopped. 3 drivers who saw what happened and chose to keep driving. I've been successful in business because I can read people, and I've learned that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. You stopped when others didn't. That tells me everything about who you are. She extended her hand and Daniel shook it, feeling the strength in her grip despite her ordeal. Welcome to Carter Innovations, Daniel Hayes. I have a feeling you're going to change more than just our product designs. After she left, Daniel lay in the darkening room watching the sun set through his window. 24 hours ago, he'd been a factory worker struggling to make ends meet, wondering how he'd pay the electric bill and buy his daughter new shoes. Now he was a senior consultant at one of the most innovative companies in the country with a salary that would transform his family's life. All because he'd chosen to stop on a bridge in a storm. Rebecca would have laughed at the cosmic justice of it all. She'd always believed that the universe had a plan, that good things came to those who did good. Daniel had lost that faith when cancer took her, when medical bills destroyed their savings, when he'd had to watch his daughters learn to live with less while their classmates had more. But maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had been right all along. His phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Dad, there's been a delivery, like a huge delivery. The living room is full of boxes." Before he could respond, another text came through, this one with a photo. Their small apartment's living room was indeed full of boxes, electronics, clothes, what looked like a new laptop and tablets. A note was visible on top of one box, written in elegant handwriting, "For the Hayes family. The future starts today. I see." Daniel closed his eyes, feeling tears slip down his cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or even joy exactly. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming realization that sometimes, not often, but sometimes the universe conspires to reward those who act with courage and compassion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He'd have to learn new systems, work with people who'd spent their careers in corporate environments, prove that he belonged in those gleaming offices despite his factory floor background. There would be those who'd whisper about nepotism, who'd assume he only got the job because he'd saved the CEO's life. Let them whisper. Daniel Hayes had spent 3 years holding his family together with determination and love. He'd survived the loss of his wife, the crushing weight of debt, the daily grind of a job that never paid enough. He'd jumped into a freezing river to save a stranger. After all that, how hard could a corporate job really be? The morning Daniel was scheduled to start at Carter Innovations, he stood before his bathroom mirror, adjusting the tie Maya had picked out for him. It was new part of the wardrobe that had mysteriously appeared courtesy of Isabella's intervention, and it felt strange against his throat after years of wearing factory uniforms. His reflection looked like a stranger, clean-shaven, professionally dressed. The bruises from his river adventure faded to faint yellows and greens. "Dad, you look like one of those guys from the business channels Mom used to watch," Lily said from the doorway, still in her pajamas despite the early hour. She'd insisted on seeing him off on his first day. "Is that good or bad?" Daniel asked, genuinely uncertain. "Good. You look like someone important." But Daniel didn't feel important as he drove through the gates of Riverside Corporate Park in his old Honda Civic, acutely aware of how it looked parked among the BMWs and Teslas in the employee lot. The Carter Innovations building was a monument to modern architecture, glass and steel, reaching toward the sky, solar panels glinting on every surface, the company logo rotating slowly on a fountain that seemed to defy gravity. Margaret Stern met him in the lobby, as composed and professional as she'd been in the hospital. "Mr. Hayes, welcome. Ms. Carter asked me to personally handle your orientation." The next hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, ID badges, and introductions. The offices were like something from a science fiction movie, open floor plans with standing desks, meditation rooms, a cafeteria that looked more like a 5-star restaurant. Engineers worked on holographic displays discussing problems Daniel only half understood despite his degree. "This is where you'll be working," Margaret said, leading him to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Ms. Carter insisted you have a space that allows for both privacy and collaboration." Daniel stood frozen in the doorway. The office was bigger than his apartment's living room. A top-of-the-line computer setup dominated one wall, while another held whiteboards and design screens. A leather couch occupied one corner, and there was even a small refrigerator. "This can't be right," he said. "I'm just a consultant. This looks like an executive office." "Senior consultant," Margaret corrected. "And Miss Carter was very specific about your placement. You'll be working directly with the Lifeline project team, but she wanted you to have autonomy and resources." A knock on the doorframe interrupted them. A young man stood there, maybe 25, with thick glasses and an eager expression. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Kevin Chen, lead programmer on Lifeline. I've been dying to meet you." "Please call me Daniel," he said, shaking Kevin's hand and noting the surprisingly firm grip. "The whole team's talking about you," Kevin said excitedly. "The guy who actually saved someone's life with his bare hands. Do you know how rare that is? We design life-saving equipment, but most of us have never even seen a real emergency." "That's about to change," a familiar voice said from behind them. Isabella Carter entered, looking every inch the CEO in a charcoal suit that emphasized her recovered vitality. The only sign of her ordeal was a thin scar on her forehead, barely visible under expertly applied makeup. Kevin, gather the team in conference room A. It's time Mr. Hayes saw what we're working on. 20 minutes later, Daniel found himself surrounded by some of the brightest minds he'd ever encountered. The conference table was littered with prototypes, tablets, and technical drawings. At the center sat something that looked like a high-tech briefcase crossed with a medical kit. This is the Lifeline Mark III, Isabella explained, opening the case to reveal an array of devices Daniel didn't recognize. It's designed to provide comprehensive trauma care in the field, automated diagnostics, drug delivery, even surgical assistance via augmented reality. In theory, it could turn anyone into a paramedic. In theory, Kevin added with obvious frustration. In practice, it takes 12 minutes to deploy properly, requires a stable surface, and the AR system assumes perfect lighting conditions. Daniel studied the device, his mind already seeing the problems. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the case. Isabella nodded, and Daniel lifted it. The weight was wrong, too heavy for someone to carry while running. He tried to open it with one hand, simulating holding a patient, and found it impossible. The latches required 2 hands and precise finger placement. "In the river," he said slowly. "I had maybe 30 seconds to make decisions. My hands were numb from the cold. I could barely see through the rain and darkness." He set the case down. "This is designed for a hospital, not a crisis." "That's exactly the problem," Isabella said. "We've spent 2 years and $40 million developing something that works perfectly in controlled conditions and fails completely in real ones." An older engineer, introduced as Dr. Robert Stein, bristled slightly. "The technology is sound. We just need to refine the deployment mechanism." "With respect, Dr. Stein," Daniel said carefully, aware he was the newcomer challenging established expertise. "The deployment mechanism is the technology. If people can't use it when they need it most, it doesn't matter how advanced the components are." "So what would you suggest?" Dr. Stein's tone carried a challenge. Daniel thought about those moments in the river, the desperate simplicity of survival. Start over. Not with the technology, but with the situation. Build for the worst-case scenario: someone alone injured themselves, maybe dealing with multiple casualties in impossible conditions. "That's a pretty radical approach," Kevin said, but his eyes were bright with interest. "Radical saves lives," Isabella interjected. "Conservative thinking would have left me at the bottom of that river." She looked around the table. "I'm giving this team 6 months to redesign Lifeline from the ground up, with Daniel having full veto power over any design element that doesn't work in crisis conditions." Dr. Stein's face flushed. "Ms. Carter, with all due respect, Mr. Hayes has been here less than a day. To give him veto power over 2 years of research. 2 years of research that produced an unusable product," Isabella said coolly. "Robert, you're brilliant. Your patents have saved thousands of lives. But you've never had to use them yourself while someone was dying in front of you. Daniel has. That experience is worth more than all the degrees in this room combined." The meeting continued for another hour, tension thick between the old guard and the new perspective Daniel represented. But gradually, as he shared more details about the rescue, the way his knife had been the most crucial tool, how holding Isabella's head above water while swimming had required techniques no one would think to program, the team began to understand. After the meeting, Isabella asked Daniel to walk with her. They strolled through the campus's carefully maintained gardens, a stark contrast to the industrial district where Morrison Manufacturing squatted like a gray toad. "Robert will come around," she said. "He's protective of his work, but he's not stupid. He knows Lifeline isn't ready." "I don't want to alienate your team," Daniel said. "They've forgotten more about medical technology than I'll ever know." "But you know something they don't, what it feels like when someone's life is literally in your hands." Isabella paused by a bench, turning to face him. "I need to tell you something. The night of the accident wasn't random. Someone wanted me dead." Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. "What?" "My brake lines were cut. Not obviously just enough to fail under stress, like taking a turn too fast in the rain. The police are investigating, but I have my own security team looking into it." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if you're working closely with me, you could become a target too. You deserve to know the risk." Daniel thought about his daughters, about the new stability he'd just found for them. Then he thought about Isabella in that sinking car fighting against her seatbelt with bloody fingers. Someone tried to kill you, and your response is to keep going to work. My response is to find out who and why, Isabella corrected. The best defense is understanding your enemy, and right now I need people around me I can trust. You jumped into a river for a stranger. That makes you more trustworthy than anyone else in my orbit. You can't run a company based on who would jump in rivers for you. No, but I can build an inner circle that way. She started walking again. There's a board meeting next week. Some members are pushing for a merger with Nexus Pharmaceuticals. I've been blocking it because Nexus has a history of buying innovative companies and shelving their research to protect existing profits. And someone thought killing you would clear the path for the merger. That's one theory. Another is that someone wants to steal the Lifeline technology before we can patent the final version. The medical device industry is worth billions, and a truly functional field trauma system would revolutionize emergency medicine. They'd reached the building's main entrance again. Through the glass, Daniel could see employees moving with purpose, building the future one innovation at a time. It was a far cry from the repetitive monotony of the factory floor. I should have told you this before you signed the contract, Isabella said. If you want to reconsider— My wife died of cancer, Daniel interrupted. Slow, painful, watching her fade a little more each day. If someone wants to come after me, at least it'll be quick. Isabella studied him. That's a dark way to look at it. That's an honest way to look at it. I spent 3 years being afraid of bills, afraid of losing the house, afraid of failing my daughters. I'm tired of being afraid. If working here means taking risks, then I'll take them. But I need you to promise me something. What? If something happens to me, you'll make sure my daughters are taken care of. College funds, health insurance, whatever they need. Nothing's going to happen to you, Isabella said firmly. I've already assigned a security detail. A what? You won't see them. They're very discreet. But until we know who's behind the attack, I'm not taking chances with the man who saved my life. Daniel wanted to protest, but the set of Isabella's jaw suggested it would be pointless. My daughters are covered too. Like I said, discreet. They won't even know they're being watched. The next days blurred together in a combination of intensive learning and gradual integration. Daniel spent mornings with the Lifeline team, challenging assumptions and offering perspectives that made Dr. Stein alternately frustrated and intrigued. Afternoons were dedicated to catching up on 8 years of technological advancement, with Kevin serving as an enthusiastic tutor. You're picking this up faster than expected, Kevin said one afternoon as they reviewed the latest diagnostic algorithms. Your engineering foundation is solid. Rebecca used to say I was too stubborn to admit when something was too hard for me, Daniel replied, then caught himself. He'd been mentioning his wife more lately, as if the new environment had loosened the tight grip he'd kept on his grief. She sounds like she was special. She was. Daniel pulled up a photo on his phone, Rebecca, at their last Christmas together, thin from chemo, but smiling, surrounded by wrapping paper and their daughter's laughter. She would have loved this place. She was always pushing me to do more with my degree. Why didn't you? Life. Kids came early before we were really ready. Rebecca's parents died in a car accident, leaving medical bills. My dad had a stroke and needed care. There was always something more immediate than career advancement. Kevin adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit Daniel had noticed. My parents sacrificed everything to send me to MIT. Sometimes I feel guilty working here, making more in a year than they made in 10. Don't, Daniel said firmly. Parents sacrifice so their kids can have better lives. The best way to honor that is to succeed. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Raised voices, then the sharp crack of something breaking. Daniel was moving before his brain fully processed the sound, old instincts from years of factory accidents taking over. In the main lab, Dr. Stein stood amid the wreckage of what had been a prototype, his face flushed with rage. A younger engineer, Sarah Martinez, was backed against a wall looking terrified. 3 months of work, Stein shouted, destroyed because you couldn't follow basic protocols. I ran the simulation exactly as specified, Sarah started. Obviously not, or we wouldn't be looking at a $50,000 mistake. Daniel stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. Dr. Stein, why don't we take a break? Sarah, could you show me what happened? Stein whirled on him. This isn't your concern, Hayes. You're here to consult on field applications, not manage my staff. I'm here to help make Lifeline work, Daniel replied evenly. That includes making sure the team can function under pressure. Right now, you're creating more pressure than any emergency would. For a moment, the lab went silent, everyone watching to see how the confrontation would play out. Then Isabella's voice cut through the tension. Dr. Stein, my office, now. She stood in the doorway, her expression neutral, but her tone brooking no argument. Mr. Hayes, please assess the damage and report to me within the hour. After Stein stormed out, Daniel helped Sarah gather the broken pieces of the prototype. You okay? She nodded, though her hands were shaking. He's been getting worse lately. Ever since you arrived, actually. I think he feels threatened. By me, I barely understand half of what you all are working on. But you understand the half that matters, Sarah said. The human half. Stein's brilliant, but he sees problems as equations to solve, not lives to save. Daniel studied the broken device, recognizing some of the components. What was this supposed to do? Automated injection system. It reads vital signs and administers appropriate drugs without human intervention, but the pressure sensors kept failing in the simulation. Show me the specs. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah walked him through the design. The technology was impressive, but Daniel kept coming back to a fundamental flaw. You're assuming the patient will be still, he said, finally. In real trauma, people thrash. They fight even when you're trying to help them. Isabella nearly punched me in the face when I was pulling her out. Sarah's eyes widened. We never accounted for resistance movement. Because you've never had someone dying in your arms, Daniel said gently. It's not a criticism, it's just a gap in experience. That's why Isabella brought me here. When he reported to Isabella's office, he found her standing at the window wall looking out at the city. Dr. Stein's termination paperwork sat on her desk. You're firing him, Daniel asked. He's brilliant, Isabella said without turning. Published, respected, innovative. He's also toxic to the team dynamic and resistant to change. I kept him this long because of his expertise, but expertise without adaptability is just expensive stubbornness. He's been here since the beginning. The team respects him. The team fears him. There's a difference. She finally turned and Daniel saw exhaustion in her eyes. I need you to take over as project lead. What? No. I've been here 2 weeks. I'm not qualified. You just solved in 30 minutes what Stein couldn't fix in 3 months. Sarah texted me about the movement resistance issue. It's brilliant in its simplicity. It's common sense if you've been in actual emergencies. Exactly. That's what Lifeline needs, common sense from someone who's been there. She moved to her desk, pulling up holographic displays of various prototypes. I'm restructuring the entire project. You'll lead the practical design team. Kevin will handle software integration. Sarah will manage biomedical components. Together, you'll build something that actually works. Dr. Stein's supporters won't accept this. You could have a revolt. Then they can revolt elsewhere. I didn't build this company by committee, and I won't save lives that way either. She paused, studying him. There's something else. My security team found evidence of internal communication between Stein and Nexus Pharmaceuticals. Daniel felt the pieces clicking together. He was feeding them information, possibly, or he was positioning himself for a job after the merger he assumed would happen after my death. Isabella's voice was steady, but Daniel heard the betrayal underneath. I trusted him with my father's legacy, and he may have been part of the plot to kill me. You need to involve the police. I have. They're building a case, but they need more evidence. In the meantime, I need someone running Lifeline I can trust absolutely. Daniel thought about his daughters, about the risk he'd be taking. Then he thought about all the people who might die without the technology they were developing. Okay, but we do this my way. No more ivory tower development. We test everything in real conditions. We bring in paramedics, emergency room doctors, even military medics. We build for the worst day, not the best. Isabella smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since the hospital. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The transition wasn't smooth. 3 engineers quit when Daniel was announced as project lead, calling it insulting to be led by someone with no advanced degrees or publications. But for everyone who left, Isabella found hungry young talents eager to work on something revolutionary. Daniel instituted Reality Fridays, where the team would simulate actual emergency conditions. They'd work in the rain and the dark, with artificial injuries limiting their mobility. Kevin initially protested that it was unnecessarily dramatic, but changed his mind when he couldn't open the first aid kit with gloves simulating blood-slicked hands. "This is impossible," he gasped, fighting with a simple latch. "Now imagine you're doing it while someone's screaming," Daniel said, "while their family is begging you to save them, while you can hear sirens in the distance but know they won't arrive in time." Sarah revolutionized the drug delivery system by abandoning automation altogether, instead creating color-coded, shape-specific modules that could be identified by touch alone. Green triangles for adrenaline, red circles for morphine, blue squares for anticoagulants. Simple, foolproof, designed for chaos. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into Daniel's leadership during a particularly frustrating night session. The team had been working 18-hour days trying to meet Isabella's aggressive deadline. Daniel found himself alone in the lab at 2 a.m. surrounded by failed prototypes. "You should go home," Isabella said from the doorway. She was still in her work clothes, looking as tired as he felt. "Your daughters need you." "They're with Mrs. Chen tonight. Maya has a calculus test tomorrow, and she focuses better there. Less drama than her sister creates." Isabella entered the lab, picking up one of the discarded prototypes. "We're trying too hard. Or not hard enough." "No." She set the device down. "My father used to say that the best solutions were simple ones complicated by committee. We've been adding features instead of removing obstacles." Daniel looked at the cluttered workbench at all their elaborate solutions to basic problems. "When I pulled you out, I had 3 tools that mattered: my hands, my knife, and the will to use them. So what does Lifeline really need to be? A force multiplier, not a replacement for human judgment, but an enhancement of human capability." Daniel grabbed a marker and started sketching on the whiteboard. Modular, intuitive. Each component works independently, but better together. Isabella watched him work, adding her own notes. "Like a Swiss Army knife for medical emergencies." "Exactly. If someone only has time to grab one component, it should still be useful. But if they have the full kit, they can perform miracles." Isabella's eyes were bright with possibility. This could work. They worked until dawn, redesigning Lifeline from first principles. When the team arrived that morning, they found the entire concept reimagined on the conference room walls. Kevin studied the new schematics with growing excitement. This is brilliant. We've been trying to build a hospital in a box when we should have been building tools for heroes." "Not heroes," Daniel corrected. "Regular people in extraordinary circumstances. Heroes are rare. Courage is common if you give it the right tools." The new design phase moved with unprecedented speed. Without Stein's rigid oversight, the team flourished. Sarah's medical components became elegant in their simplicity. Kevin's software focused on guidance rather than automation. Daniel insisted every piece be tested by people with no medical training, including Lily when she visited the office. "If an 11-year-old can't figure it out in 30 seconds, it's too complicated," he said, watching his daughter successfully apply a prototype emergency bandage to a mannequin. "Dad, this is so cool," Lily exclaimed. "It shows me exactly where to put pressure." Isabella watched from the doorway, a strange expression on her face. Later, she pulled Daniel aside. "Your daughters are remarkable. They get it from their mother. They get it from both parents." She hesitated, then continued. "I've been thinking about the foundation my father started. It provides scholarships for underprivileged students interested in STEM fields. I'd like Maya to apply. She's only a sophomore. The program includes mentorship and summer internships. She'd be perfect for it." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Isabella, you've already done so much. This isn't charity. Your daughter has a brilliant mind. It would be criminal to let financial constraints limit her potential." She paused. "Besides, purely selfishly, I need more people like your family in my life. People who understand that success means nothing without purpose." Before Daniel could respond, alarms began blaring through the building. Not fire alarms, security alerts. "Lockdown protocol activated," the building's AI announced. "All personnel remain in place." Isabella's phone buzzed. She answered, her face paling as she listened. There's been a breach in the server room. Someone's trying to steal the lifeline data. They ran toward the security center, Daniel keeping pace with Isabella, despite her longer legs. The hallways were eerily empty employees following lockdown procedures. In the security office, monitors showed a figure in black moving through the server room, downloading files to a portable drive. How did they get past the biometric locks? Isabella demanded. The security chief, Thomas, pulled up access logs. They used Dr. Stein's credentials. He may have left a back door before his termination. Can we stop the download? Not without triggering a complete system wipe. We'd lose everything. Daniel studied the screens, his mind racing. Where's the main power junction for that room? Basement level section C, but Daniel was already moving. Call the police. I'll try to buy time. Daniel, no. Isabella called after him, but he was gone. The basement was a maze of pipes and electrical conduits lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in harsh shadows. Daniel found the junction box, his factory training finally useful. He could cut power to the server room, but it would also trigger the emergency protocols, sealing the intruder inside. A sound behind him made him freeze, and footsteps moving carefully through the darkness. I wondered who would come, a familiar voice said. Dr. Stein emerged from the shadows holding what looked like a modified taser. I should have guessed it would be you. The hero complex is strong. Robert, what are you doing? Taking what's mine. 2 years of my life went into Lifeline. Isabella wants to give it away, make it affordable for everyone. Do you know how much money we're losing? We're talking about saving lives. We're talking about billions of dollars. Stein's composure cracked. Nexus offered me 8 figures for the complete designs, enough to fund my own research for decades. So you tried to kill Isabella. That wasn't supposed to happen. She was just supposed to be delayed, miss the board meeting where the merger vote was scheduled. But she had to take that curve too fast, had to go over the bridge instead of into the barrier. He raised the taser. And you had to play hero. Daniel's hand found the knife in his pocket. Rebecca's gift, the one that had saved Isabella's life. You don't want to do this, Robert. No, but I will. The intruder upstairs is a professional. By the time they investigate, the trail will lead to industrial espionage from China. You'll be collateral damage, killed trying to stop them. Stein fired the taser, but Daniel was already moving, factory reflexes and riverborn instincts combining. The probe struck the electrical panel behind him, sending sparks cascading through the basement. In the strobing light, Daniel closed the distance, his shoulder catching Stein in the midsection. They went down hard, rolling across the concrete floor. Stein was taller, but Daniel was stronger, years of manual labor having built muscle that gym workouts couldn't match. Still, Stein fought with the desperation of a man facing prison, his elbow catching Daniel's still healing ribs. The knife skittered away, lost in the darkness. They grappled, each seeking advantage, until Daniel managed to pin Stein against a support column. But Stein's hand found a pipe wrench, swinging it toward Daniel's head. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Stein jerked the wrench, falling from nerveless fingers. Behind them, Isabella stood with Thomas and 2 security guards, her hand steady on a smoking pistol. I'm a very good shot, she said calmly. My father insisted. The next one won't be in your shoulder. Stein collapsed, clutching his wounded shoulder, his grand plan unraveling. The police arrived minutes later, along with federal agents who'd been investigating the industrial espionage angle. The intruder in the server room turned out to be a hired mercenary who quickly gave up Stein as his employer when faced with federal charges. In the aftermath, as paramedics treated Daniel's reopened wounds and police took statements, Isabella found him sitting on the loading dock watching the sunrise. You could have been killed, she said, sitting beside him. So could you. Nice shooting, by the way. I lied. That was the first time I've ever fired a gun outside a range. I was aiming for his leg. Despite everything, Daniel laughed. Don't tell him that. Our secret. She was quiet for a moment. You saved me again. You saved me right back. I'd say we're even. We'll never be even, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the best partnerships are built on mutual debts that can never quite be repaid. Daniel thought about that, about the strange path that had led him from a bridge in a storm to this moment. Your father would be proud of what you're building. I hope so. Isabella stood, offering him her hand. Come on, we have a device to finish, lives to save, a future to build. Daniel took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. As they walked back into Carter Innovations, he thought about Rebecca, about how she'd always believed in the power of unexpected blessings. 6 months ago, he'd been drowning in a different kind of river: poverty, grief, hopelessness. Now he was part of something larger than himself. The Lifeline Project would go on to save thousands of lives with Daniel's practical insights, making it accessible to first responders worldwide. Maya would get her scholarship, eventually joining Carter Innovations as a lead engineer. Lily would grow up believing anything was possible if you had the courage to reach for it. But all of that was still to come. In this moment, Daniel Hayes walked beside Isabella Carter into a building full of possibility, two survivors bound by water and blood, ready to change the world one innovation at a time. The weeks following Stein's arrest brought a strange mixture of intensity and calm to Carter Innovations. Federal investigators combed through years of communications, uncovering a web of corporate espionage that reached deeper than anyone had imagined. Daniel threw himself into the Lifeline Project with renewed urgency, knowing that somewhere out there other companies were racing to develop similar technology. "Dad, you missed dinner again," Maya said over the phone, her voice carrying that particular blend of understanding and disappointment that made Daniel's chest ache. "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. The prototype testing ran long and—" "It's okay. Lily saved you a plate. She made mac and cheese from scratch the way Mom used to." Daniel closed his eyes, leaning back in his office chair. Through the window, the city lights sparkled like earthbound stars. "I'll be home soon. Tell her I'll heat it up when I get there." "Actually," Maya hesitated, "Ms. Carter called earlier. She invited us to dinner tomorrow night, all three of us." Daniel straightened. Isabella had maintained professional boundaries since the incident with Stein, their interactions limited to work discussions and project meetings. A dinner invitation felt like crossing an invisible line. Did she say why? Something about wanting to know the family behind the man who keeps saving her company. Lily's already picking out her best dress. The next evening found Daniel standing outside Isabella's penthouse apartment, his daughters flanking him. The building was the kind of place he'd only seen in movies: a doorman marble lobbies, elevators that required special keys to reach the top floors. "This is where she lives," Lily whispered, eyes wide. "It's like a palace." "It's just an apartment," Daniel said, though he understood his daughter's awe. Isabella answered the door herself, dressed casually in jeans and a simple sweater that somehow made her look younger, more approachable. "You came," she said, genuine pleasure in her voice. "You invited us," Daniel replied, suddenly aware of how his off-the-rack blazer must look in these surroundings. "I was afraid you'd find an excuse. You have a talent for avoiding non-work social situations." She turned to his daughters, her smile warming. "Maya, Lily, I'm so glad you're here. I've heard so much about you both." The penthouse was stunning but surprisingly warm, filled with personal touches. Family photos, worn books, a piano with sheet music scattered across its bench. This wasn't the sterile showplace Daniel had expected. "You play?" Maya asked, noticing the piano. "Badly," Isabella admitted. "My father insisted I learn. He said music taught discipline and mathematics simultaneously. I mostly just enjoyed making noise." Dinner was catered but served family-style, everyone helping themselves from shared dishes. Isabella asked the girls about school, their interests, their dreams, and she listened with genuine attention that made even shy Lily open up. "I want to be a marine biologist," but Lily announced, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I know it's silly." "Why would that be silly?" Isabella asked. "The oceans are the last frontier on Earth. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own deep seas." "That's what I tell people, but they say there's no money in it, that I should be practical." "Practical is overrated," Isabella said, catching Daniel's eye. "Your father wasn't practical when he jumped into that river. If he had been, I wouldn't be here." "He's always doing impractical things," Maya said with a fond eye roll, "like taking a job he wasn't qualified for just because someone believed in him." "He's more than qualified," Isabella said firmly. "The Lifeline Project has made more progress in 2 months under his leadership than it did in 2 years under Stein." Daniel felt heat rise to his face. "We have a good team, led by a good man." Isabella's gaze held his for a moment before she turned back to the girls. Would you like to see the terrace? You can see the whole city from up there. As the girls explored the wraparound terrace with its stunning views, Isabella and Daniel found themselves alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Thank you for coming, she said softly. I know it's awkward mixing personal and professional. It's fine, Daniel interrupted. The girls were thrilled. They don't get many fancy dinners. That's not why I invited you. Isabella turned to face him fully. I've been thinking about what you said about partnerships built on debts that can't be repaid, but I don't want our relationship to be about debt. What do you want it to be about? Before she could answer, Lily's scream pierced the night. Daniel was moving instantly, rushing onto the terrace to find his youngest daughter backing away from a figure climbing over the railing. The man was dressed in black tactical gear, a rappelling rope extending to the roof. He had a gun currently pointed at Lily, who stood frozen between him and the terrace door. Nobody move, the intruder said, his accent vaguely Eastern European. I'm here for the Carter woman. The rest of you can leave once I have what I came for. Daniel's mind calculated distances and angles, his body coiled to spring, but the gun was too close to Lily. One wrong move and his daughter would pay the price. I'm right here, Isabella said, stepping forward with remarkable calm. Let the child go and we can discuss what you want. What I want is the complete Lifeline schematics. The real ones, not the decoys you've been showing the board. Those files are encrypted and stored off-site. I'd need to go to the office. No. The man pulled out a tablet with one hand keeping the gun trained on Lily with the other. You can access them from here. Executive override protocols. I've done my homework. Maya had moved closer to her sister, trying to shield her without being obvious about it. Daniel felt pride and terror in equal measure. Fine, Isabella said, taking the tablet. But this is going to take a few minutes. The encryption is multi-layered. As Isabella worked, Daniel inched closer to his daughters. The intruder noticed swinging the gun toward him. I said, don't move. I'm just trying to comfort my children. They'll need more than comfort if you take another step. Isabella's fingers flew across the tablet screen, but Daniel caught something in her expression. She wasn't just accessing files. She was doing something else. There, she said, handing back the tablet. The files are downloading to your server. The man checked the screen, satisfied. Good. Now everyone moves to the corner. I'll leave the way I came, and if nobody follows, nobody gets hurt. They started moving, but as the intruder backed toward the railing, still covering them with the gun, Lily stumbled. It was a small thing, a child's clumsiness, but she fell toward the man. He reacted instinctively, moving the gun to avoid hitting her, and in that split second, Daniel launched himself forward. They hit the railing hard, the gun spinning away into the night. The intruder was trained skilled in close combat, but Daniel fought with a father's fury. They grappled against the barrier 40 stories of empty air yawning below. The man got his arm around Daniel's throat, choking him. Daniel's vision started to dim, but then Maya was there, kicking at the attacker's knee with her soccer-trained legs. The man cursed his grip loosening, and Daniel broke free. Isabella appeared with the gun, holding it steady. Let him go, or I'll shoot. The intruder laughed. You won't risk hitting him. Want to bet your life on that? Isabella's voice was ice cold. I've already killed one man to protect this family. You'd be number 2. Something in her tone must have convinced him. The intruder released Daniel, raising his hands. The files are already transmitted. Killing me won't stop what's coming. No, but it'll make me feel better, Isabella said. Then, to Daniel's surprise, she smiled. By the way, those weren't the Lifeline files you downloaded. They were something special I prepared for anyone who tried to steal from me. The intruder's eyes widened. He pulled out his phone, presumably to check with his handlers, and his face went pale. What did you do? I gave you exactly what you deserved, a virus that's currently destroying every system it touches. Your entire network is probably crashed by now. Oh, and it also transmitted your location and all your communications to the FBI. They should be here any minute. Sirens were indeed approaching, growing louder. The intruder looked at the railing, calculating whether he could reach his rope before Isabella shot him. Don't, Daniel warned, moving between the man and his escape route. It's over. The police arrived in force, followed by federal agents who seemed unsurprised by the situation. As they led the intruder away, one agent stayed behind to take statements. Ms. Carter, this is the third attempt on your intellectual property in 6 months, the agent said. Perhaps you should consider additional security measures. I'll take it under advisement, Isabella replied, her arm around Lily, who hadn't left her side since the incident. After the authorities left, Daniel found himself standing with Isabella on the now quiet terrace. His daughters were inside Maya calling Mrs. Chen to let her know they'd be late. You knew something like this might happen, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. I suspected. There's been chatter about Lifeline in certain circles. Other companies know we're close to breakthrough. She touched his face gently, examining a bruise forming on his jaw. I'm sorry. I never should have invited you here, put your family at risk. Stop. Daniel caught her hand, holding it. We're not going to do this. We're not going to let fear dictate how we live. Your daughters could have been hurt, but they weren't. And they got to see that sometimes standing up to bad people is necessary, even when it's scary. He squeezed her hand. Especially when it's scary. Isabella looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Daniel, I need to tell you something. These past months working with you, seeing how you are with your daughters, the way you approach every problem with such integrity. Ms. Carter, mes maçons. Lily appeared in the doorway. Are you okay? Isabella smiled at the girl. I'm fine, sweetie. Are you? Lily nodded, then surprised everyone by hugging Isabella tightly. Thank you for protecting us. Your dad did the protecting, Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion. You both did, Lily said with the wisdom children sometimes possess. That's what families do. Later, as Daniel drove his daughters home, Maya asked, Dad, do you like Ms. Carter? She's my boss, Maya. That's not what I asked. Daniel glanced at his eldest daughter, seeing too much understanding in her eyes. It's complicated. Mom's been gone 3 years, Maya said gently. She wouldn't want you to be alone forever. I'm not alone. I have you and Lily. That's not the same, and you know it. Maya was quiet for a moment. Miss Carter looks at you the way Mom used to, like you're something special. Your mother was special. Isabella Miss Carter. She's just grateful I saved her life. Dad, Lily piped up from the back seat. For someone so smart about engineering, you're really dumb about feelings. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work to find his office filled with flowers. Not a bouquet, an entire garden's worth covering every surface. The card simply said, Thank you for last night. Kevin stuck his head in, grinning. Someone's got an admirer. It's just a thank you, Daniel muttered, though he carefully moved the card to his wallet. Right, because everyone sends $5,000 worth of flowers to say thanks. The Lifeline project consumed the next weeks. They were close to a final prototype, something that could actually be manufactured and distributed. Daniel pushed the team harder than ever, knowing that other companies were racing to beat them to market. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Sarah had been working on the drug delivery system when she suddenly shouted, bringing everyone running. I've got it. She held up what looked like a pen. Single-use, preloaded, color-coded caps for different drugs. No measurement needed, no calculation required. Just match the color to the symptom guide and inject. Daniel tested it on a mannequin, the simplicity beautiful. This is it. This is what we've been looking for. We still need to integrate it with the diagnostic system, Kevin said, but he was smiling. Then let's integrate it, Isabella said from the doorway. None of them had heard her arrive. I want a working prototype by end of week. They worked straight through, catching catnaps on office couches, living on coffee and takeout. Daniel called his daughters twice a day, apologizing for his absence, but they understood. This was important. By Friday afternoon, they had it. The complete Lifeline system packed into a case the size of a large lunchbox, weighing less than 10 pounds. Every component was intuitive, durable, and effective. We need to test it, Daniel said. Real-world conditions. I've arranged something, Isabella said. The city's emergency services are running a disaster drill tomorrow. Mass casualty simulation. They've agreed to let us participate. The drill was chaos, controlled but realistic. A simulated building collapse with dozens of victims played by volunteers with fake injuries ranging from minor cuts to severe trauma. Daniel's team spread out, each carrying a Lifeline kit. Daniel found himself treating a victim with simulated arterial bleeding. The old him, the factory worker, would have frozen. But the kit guided him through step by step. Pressure here, injection there, monitoring vitals through the simple display. Within minutes, the patient was stabilized. Across the field, he saw Lily Isabella had somehow arranged for his daughters to observe, watching with wide eyes as Sarah used another kit to treat multiple victims simultaneously. The color coding system allowed even untrained volunteers to help following simple pictographic instructions. The fire chief, a grizzled veteran named Rodriguez, approached Daniel afterward. "That's the most effective civilian medical response I've ever seen. When can we get these?" "Soon," Isabella answered, appearing beside them. "We're going into production next month." "What about cost?" Rodriguez asked. "City budgets are tight." "We're implementing a tiered pricing system," Isabella explained. "Full price for private hospitals and wealthy districts, subsidized rates for public services, and donation programs for underserved areas." Rodriguez looked skeptical. "Your board approved that." "My board doesn't get a vote," Isabella said firmly. "This technology will save lives regardless of economic status." That evening, the team celebrated at a local bar. For the first time in months, they could relax knowing they'd created something extraordinary. Daniel nursed a beer, watching his team laugh and joke, feeling a pride different from any factory accomplishment. "You did this," Isabella said, sliding onto the bar stool beside him. "You took a failed project and turned it into something revolutionary." "We did this," Daniel corrected. "All of us." "But you let us. You showed us what really mattered." She was quiet for a moment. "My father would have loved you. Based on what you've told me about him, I would have loved him too." Isabella turned to face him fully. "Daniel, that night at my apartment before we were interrupted." "Isabella," he started, but she pressed a finger to his lips. "Let me finish. I know this is complicated. I'm your boss, you're still grieving your wife, and we have a professional relationship that could be jeopardized. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea. But when I was drowning in that car, when I thought I was going to die, my biggest regret wasn't about the company or the money or any of that. It was that I'd never let anyone really know me. I'd never taken the risk of being vulnerable with someone." Daniel set down his beer, giving her his full attention. "And now I know that life's too short and too uncertain to let fear make decisions for us." She took a breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Daniel Hayes. Not because you saved my life, but because of who you are. The way you think, the way you love your daughters, the way you see solutions where others see problems." Daniel felt his heart racing like it hadn't since Rebecca's diagnosis. "Isabella, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." But Daniel was already moving, cupping her face in his calloused hands, kissing her with all the longing he'd been suppressing for months. She kissed him back, and for a moment, the bar, the team, the world itself disappeared. When they parted, both breathing hard, Daniel saw tears in Isabella's eyes. "I thought I'd never feel this again," he whispered. "After Rebecca, I thought that part of me died with her." "Maybe it did," Isabella said softly. "Maybe this is something new built on the foundation of who you were, but reaching toward who you're becoming." Sarah's wolf whistle broke the moment, and they realized the entire team was watching with huge grins. "About damn time," Kevin called out. "We've been placing bets for weeks." Daniel felt his face burn, but Isabella just laughed. "Who won?" "Margaret," Sarah admitted. "She said it would happen during the celebration party." "Margaret knows everything," Isabella said, then kissed Daniel again to the cheers of their team. But the celebration was short-lived. Daniel's phone rang, Mrs. Chen frantic. "Daniel, there are men at your apartment. They said they're federal agents, but something feels wrong." Daniel's blood went cold. "Where are my daughters?" "I have them at my place, but these men, they're going through your apartment," and the line went dead. Daniel was already moving Isabella beside him. "Thomas?" she called to her security chief, who'd been nursing a club soda in the corner. "We have a situation." They raced across the city, Thomas driving with professional skill while coordinating with his team over encrypted comms. By the time they reached Daniel's apartment building, real federal agents were already there. "Mr. Hayes, Agent Morrison, whom Daniel recognized from the previous investigations, approached them. "We have a problem. Someone impersonated federal agents to search your apartment. They were looking for something specific." Daniel's apartment was ransacked, but not randomly. Whoever had searched it had been methodical professional. "They were looking for lifeline data," Isabella said with certainty. "They must think Daniel keeps copies at home." "Do you?" Morrison asked. "Of course not. All work stays at the office." But something was nagging at Daniel. He went to his bedroom to Rebecca's jewelry box that he'd never been able to pack away. Inside, beneath her wedding ring and the locket with their daughter's baby pictures, was a flash drive. "What is that?" Isabella asked. "Rebecca's medical records. I digitized everything after she died, trying to understand if we could have caught it earlier." Daniel pulled out the drive and his heart sank. Someone had marked it with a tiny dot of red ink. They found it. They marked it, but left it. "Why would they?" Isabella's eyes widened. "They think that's where you hid lifeline data. They're planning to come back for it." Agent Morrison immediately began coordinating a surveillance operation. "We'll use it as bait. When they come back, we'll be waiting." "My daughters," Daniel said. "They're not safe." "We're moving them to a secure location," Morrison assured him. "This ends tonight." The trap was set. Daniel and his daughters were relocated to a safe house while agents waited in and around the apartment. Isabella insisted on staying with them despite Morrison's protests. "They're after my technology," she said firmly. "I'm involved whether you like it or not." The safe house was a modest suburban home, unremarkable from the outside, but equipped with state-of-the-art security. Daniel's daughters were scared, but trying to be brave. Maya comforting Lily while pretending she wasn't terrified herself. "This is like a movie," Lily said, trying to find excitement in the fear. "Movies end in 2 hours," Maya replied. "This is real life." Isabella sat with them, telling stories about her father's early days building the company, how he'd started in a garage with nothing but ideas and determination. Daniel watched her with his daughters, saw how naturally she fit into their dynamic, and felt something in his chest that was equal parts joy and terror. His phone buzzed a message from Morrison. They took the bait. 3 men heavily armed. We're moving in. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Daniel paced while Isabella kept the girls distracted with card games. Finally, Morrison called. "We got them. Professional mercenaries hired through intermediaries. But Daniel, we found something else. They had detailed information about your family, your routines, your daughter's schools. This wasn't just about Lifeline." "What do you mean?" "Someone wants leverage over Ms. Carter. They knew about your relationship, about how important you've become to her. You and your daughters were going to be kidnapped, used to force her to hand over the technology." Daniel felt sick. His involvement with Isabella had put his children in danger. "We've traced the money," Morrison continued. "It leads back to Marcus Bellamy, Ms. Carter's CFO. Isabella went rigid. "Marcus? But he's been with the company for 15 years. He was my father's friend. Apparently he's been planning this for a while. He's been shorting Carter Innovation stock while secretly buying shares in your competitors. If Lifeline fails or gets stolen, he makes millions." "Where is he now?" Isabella's voice was deadly calm. "Unknown. He didn't show up for work today. We have a warrant, but—" "He has a cabin," Isabella interrupted. "In the mountains. My father gave it to him as a bonus years ago." She grabbed her phone, pulling up the address. "If he's running, that's where he'll go." Morrison wanted to handle it officially, but Isabella was already moving. "This is personal now. He threatened Daniel's children. He betrayed my father's memory. I'm going." "Isabella, no." Daniel caught her arm. "Let the authorities handle it." "The authorities move too slowly. By the time they get warrants and organize a team, he'll be in another country." She looked at him with fierce determination. "I'm ending this tonight." Thomas was already bringing the car around. Daniel looked at his daughters, then at Isabella. "I'm coming with you." "Dad, no." Maya protested. "I'll be back soon," he promised, hugging them both. "Agent Morrison will keep you safe." The drive to the mountains took 2 hours. Thomas had called in his team, and 3 vehicles wound through the dark mountain roads in formation. Isabella sat beside Daniel, her hand in his, both of them silent. The cabin appeared dark when they arrived, but Thomas's thermal scanner showed one heat signature inside. "He's in the back room," Thomas reported, "probably destroying evidence." "We go in fast," Isabella decided, "before he can finish." But as they approached, Marcus's voice called out, "I know you're there, Isabella. Come in. Let's discuss this like civilized people." Isabella started forward, but Daniel stopped her. "It could be a trap." "Everything's been a trap?" she replied. "At least this one's in the open." They entered together, Thomas and his team covering them. Marcus sat at a desk, a fire burning in the fireplace beside him, papers turning to ash. "Too late," he said calmly. "All the evidence is gone. You can't prove anything." "The mercenaries will talk," Isabella said. "Hired through intermediaries who've already disappeared. Everything leads to dead ends." Marcus stood straightening his expensive suit. "I've been planning this for 3 years, ever since you started prioritizing philanthropy over profit. My father built this company to help people. Your father was a romantic fool, and so are you." Marcus's composure cracked slightly. "Do you know what our stock price could be if we operated like a real corporation, if we charged what the market would bear instead of practically giving away our innovations? We make plenty of profit. We make a fraction of what we could." Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. "I've watched you turn down billion-dollar deals because they didn't align with your precious values. Well, values don't pay dividends. So you tried to have me killed." Isabella's voice was ice. "That was Stein's idea. Too crude for my taste. I preferred the long game, steal the technology, sell it to the highest bidder, let the company crumble while I profit from its fall." "Except you failed," Daniel said. "We stopped every attempt." Marcus looked at him with contempt. "The factory worker turned executive. Do you really think you belong in Isabella's world? You're a charity case, nothing more." Daniel felt Isabella tense beside him, but he squeezed her hand. "Maybe I am. But I'm the charity case who helped build something that will save thousands of lives. What have you built besides schemes and betrayals?" "Enough talk," Thomas said, moving forward with zip-tie restraints. "Marcus Bellamy, you're under arrest for conspiracy, industrial espionage, and attempted kidnapping." But Marcus had one more card to play. His hand moved to his desk drawer, pulling out a gun. Everyone moved at once, Thomas reaching for his weapon, Isabella stepping forward, Daniel pushing her behind him. The gunshot was deafening in the small cabin. Daniel felt the impact, a punch to his shoulder that spun him around. He heard Isabella scream, saw Thomas's return fire catch Marcus center. Mass watched the CFO crumple to the floor. Then Daniel was falling, the world tilting sideways, Isabella's face appearing above him, haloed by cabin lights. "No, no, no," she was saying, her hands pressing against his shoulder. "Not again. I can't lose you too. Just a shoulder wound." Daniel managed through the pain was extraordinary. "I've had worse." "Liar," Isabella said through tears. "You've never been shot before." "First time for everything." Thomas was already applying pressure with a field dressing his movements professional and efficient. "Through and through missed the major vessels. He'll be fine if we get him to a hospital." The ride down the mountain was a blur of pain, and Isabella's voice keeping him conscious with stories about their future, about Lifeline's launch, about the life they'd build together. "Don't you dare leave me," she kept saying. "Your daughters need you. I need you." "Not going anywhere," Daniel promised, though staying conscious was getting harder. Too stubborn to die. He passed out as they reached the hospital, waking hours later to find his room full of people. Maya and Lily were curled against him on the bed, careful of his bandaged shoulder. Isabella sat in a chair beside them, holding his hand, her eyes red from crying. "Dad?" Lily exclaimed when his eyes opened. "You're okay." "I'm okay," he confirmed, though moving hurt like hell. "Everyone's safe." "Marcus Bellamy died at the scene," Morrison said from the doorway. "The mercenaries he hired are in custody, and they're singing like canaries. The conspiracy is unraveling. It's over." Daniel looked at Isabella. "Lifeline, safe. We're moving forward with production." She squeezed his hand. "You did it. You saved everything." "We did it," Daniel corrected, including everyone in his gaze. "All of us." The recovery was harder than Daniel had anticipated. The bullet wound to his shoulder had done more damage than Thomas's field assessment suggested: torn muscles, chipped bone nerve damage that sent lightning bolts of pain down his arm at unexpected moments. But worse than the physical pain was the enforced inactivity. Daniel Hayes had never been good at sitting still. "You're going to tear your stitches if you keep trying to work," Isabella said, taking the laptop from his hands. They were in his hospital room, which had been transformed into a makeshift office over the past 3 days. Blueprints covered every surface, tablets and phones scattered across the bedside table. "The launch is in 2 weeks," Daniel protested. "There are still calibrations to run, manufacturing specs to approve, all of which Kevin and Sarah are handling perfectly well." Isabella sat on the edge of his bed, her hand finding his uninjured one. "You've built an excellent team. Let them prove it." Through the window, Daniel could see Maya and Lily in the hallway talking with Agent Morrison. The federal protection was still in place, though the immediate threat had passed with Marcus's death. His daughters had shown remarkable resilience, but he caught moments when they thought he wasn't looking. Maya's hand shaking as she did homework, Lily jumping at sudden noises. "They're scared," he said quietly. "My girls, they're trying to be brave, but they're scared." "They're not the only ones." Isabella's voice was soft. "When I saw you fall in that cabin, when I saw the blood," she stopped composing herself. "I realized something. I've been so focused on not losing you that I haven't been thinking about what it means to truly have you." "What do you mean?" Isabella stood pacing to the window. "Your daughters need stability. They've been through so much, losing their mother, the financial struggles, now this violence because of your connection to me. Maybe we should—" "Don't." Daniel's voice was firm. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." She turned to face him, tears threatening. "But what if being with me puts them in more danger? What if a meteor hits the Earth tomorrow? What if the stock market crashes? What if 1,000 things that might happen?" Daniel struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the pain. "Isabella, my daughters have seen me happier in the past few months than I've been since Rebecca died. Not because of the money or the job, but because of you." "Daniel, Lily asked me last week if you could come to her school's career day. Maya wants your advice on her college applications. They're not just accepting you, they're choosing you." He held out his hand, and after a moment she took it. "We all are." A knock interrupted them. Kevin entered carrying a prototype case. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The FDA accelerated their review of Lifeline. They want a full demonstration tomorrow morning. If we pass, we get immediate approval for nationwide distribution. If we fail, we won't be able to launch for another year," Isabella finished. "Maybe longer. Tomorrow." Daniel tried to stand, but the room spun. Isabella steadied him, easing him back onto the bed. "I need to be there." "You can barely stand," Isabella pointed out. "Then I'll sit. But this is our moment. Everything we've worked for." He looked at Kevin. "What specific concerns does the FDA have?" Kevin pulled up a tablet, scrolling through documents. "They want to see real-world application by non-medical personnel. They're bringing in volunteers with no training, simulating a mass casualty event. If our system isn't truly intuitive, if average people can't use it effectively—" "We've tested for this," Daniel said, though doubt crept in. "Sarah ran dozens of simulations." "With volunteers who knew they were helping test a medical device," Kevin countered. "The FDA wants to see what happens when someone finds Lifeline in a crisis, without any context." Daniel's mind raced through possibilities, adjustments they could make, but Isabella was already taking charge. "Kevin, gather the team. We're going to run our own simulation tonight. Find volunteers from outside the company, janitors, food service workers, anyone who hasn't been exposed to Lifeline. We'll identify any remaining issues and fix them before morning." After Kevin left, Daniel struggled with frustration. "I should be there." "You should be healing." Isabella kissed his forehead. "Trust your team. Trust me." That evening, while Isabella and the team ran simulations at Carter Innovations, Daniel found himself alone with his daughters for the first time since the shooting. Maya had brought his favorite soup from the deli near their apartment, and Lily had made cookies that were slightly burned but made with love. "Dad," Maya said carefully, "we need to talk about something." Daniel set down his soup, giving her his full attention. What is it, sweetheart? If you and Ms. Carter, Isabella, if you two are going to be together, what does that mean for us? What do you want it to mean? Lily spoke up. Would she be like our new mom? Daniel's heart clenched. No one could replace your mother. No one would try. But Isabella cares about you both very much. We know, Maya said. She called us every day while you were unconscious. She made sure we had everything we needed, even offered to hire tutors so we wouldn't fall behind in school while we were here. She said we could call her whenever we wanted, Lily added. Even gave us her personal number. Daniel hadn't known that. And how do you feel about that? Maya and Lily exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that sisters perfect over years of shared experiences. Mom would want you to be happy, Maya said finally. And Isabella makes you happy. Plus, she's kind of amazing. Did you know she has 3 patents in biomedical engineering? She told us about the scholarship program, Lily added, how she wants to help kids like us get opportunities. That's really cool. So you're okay with this? Daniel asked. With Isabella and me. Dad, Maya said with teenage exasperation, we've been okay with it longer than you have. You're the one who needed convincing. That night, Daniel barely slept. Not from pain, though his shoulder throbbed constantly, but from anxiety about the FDA demonstration. Everything they'd worked for came down to tomorrow morning. At 3 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Simulation revealed issues. Fix them. Stop worrying and rest. At 4 a.m. Still awake. Your daughter said you do this, stay up all night worrying about things you can't control. At 4:30 a.m. I'm coming to get you. You should be there tomorrow, even if you have to be in a wheelchair. By 6 a.m., Isabella arrived with Thomas and a wheelchair that Daniel protested but ultimately accepted. His daughters were already dressed and ready, having anticipated this development. We're coming too, Maya announced in a tone that brooked no argument. This is our family's work. We should be there. The FDA had taken over Carter Innovation's largest testing facility, transforming it into a disaster scene. Volunteers milled about, unaware of what they'd be asked to do. The FDA administrators, a panel of severe-looking individuals in dark suits, sat behind an observation window with tablets and clipboards. Dr. Patricia Henshaw, the lead administrator, approached them. Ms. Carter, Mr. Hayes. I'm surprised to see you here, Mr. Hayes. We heard you were injured. Ah, just a scratch, Daniel lied, though sitting upright was taking all his concentration. We're ready to begin, Dr. Henshaw said. The scenario is a building collapse with multiple casualties. Your volunteers will have 2 minutes to familiarize themselves with Lifeline before we begin. No additional instruction will be permitted. Isabella started to protest the harsh restrictions, but Daniel touched her arm. It's fair. In a real disaster, 2 minutes might be generous. They watched from the observation area as volunteers were handed Lifeline kits. Daniel held his breath as a middle-aged woman, she looked like someone's grandmother, opened a case and stared at the contents with confusion. Then something beautiful happened. She touched the color-coded components, noticed the pictographic instructions embossed on each tool, and her expression cleared. When the simulation began and actors started screaming in fake pain, she moved with purpose. Green for go, she muttered, applying the green-tagged adrenaline injector to a victim in simulated cardiac arrest. The smart sensors in the training dummy registered the correct dosage and location. Red for stop bleeding. She used the compression bandages exactly as designed. Across the room, a teenager who'd probably never seen anything more medical than a Band-Aid was successfully stabilizing a victim with simulated spinal injuries, the Lifeline's augmented reality overlay guiding him through immobilization procedures. How are they doing this? Dr. Henshaw asked, genuine surprise in her voice. We designed for fear, Daniel said, leaning forward despite the pain it caused. When people are scared, they need simple, clear directions. Every component has one primary function identified by color, shape, and texture. You could use Lifeline in complete darkness and still save lives. For 30 minutes, the simulation continued. Volunteers made mistakes, certainly, but they were non-fatal errors. More importantly, they were learning as they went, each success building confidence for the next challenge. When it ended, the statistics were undeniable. The volunteers had successfully stabilized 87% of the victims with zero critical errors that would have resulted in death. In a traditional mass casualty event without lifeline, Dr. Henshaw said, reviewing her tablet, we'd expect maybe 40% successful interventions from untrained civilians with significant risk of causing additional harm. So we passed, Isabella asked, though it sounded more like a demand than a question. Dr. Henshaw looked at her colleagues, who were all nodding. Not only passed, Ms. Carter, this is the most effective emergency medical device we've ever evaluated. The FDA is prepared to fast-track approval for immediate production and distribution. The room erupted in celebration. Kevin actually jumped in the air. Sarah burst into tears, and the rest of the team engaged in a spontaneous group hug that somehow included Daniel's wheelchair. We did it, Isabella whispered in Daniel's ear. You did it. We all did it, Daniel corrected, but he was smiling so hard his face hurt. The next weeks passed in a blur of production schedules, distribution agreements, and media attention. The story of Lifeline's development, born from a dramatic river rescue created by an unlikely partnership between a CEO and a factory worker, captured public imagination. Daniel was finally released from the hospital, though his shoulder still required physical therapy. He returned to work to find his office decorated with banners and a cake that Lily had apparently supervised the making of. Surprise! His younger daughter shouted, then immediately looked worried. Is your shoulder okay? We didn't hurt it, did we? It's perfect, Daniel assured her, pulling both his daughters into a careful hug. The first Lifeline units shipped on a Thursday. Daniel stood with Isabella on the loading dock, watching trucks pull away carrying cases that would soon be saving lives across the country. My father would have loved this moment, Isabella said softly, his dream realized. He would have been proud of you, Daniel said, of what you've built, what you've protected. What we've built, Isabella corrected. I meant what I said before. None of this happens without you. That evening, they had dinner at Isabella's penthouse, a family dinner with Daniel's daughters, helping Isabella cook, while he supervised from a stool, his shoulder still limiting his mobility. It felt natural, comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. I have something to tell you all, Isabella said as they ate. The board has approved a new initiative. For every Lifeline unit we sell at full price, we're donating one to underserved communities. That's amazing, Maya exclaimed. How many will that be? Based on current orders, about 10,000 units in the first year. 10,000 potential lives saved, Daniel said, pride swelling in his chest. More than that, Isabella said. Each unit can be used multiple times by multiple people. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of interventions. Lily had been quiet, pushing food around her plate. Finally, she spoke up. Mom would have thought this was really cool. The table went silent. They rarely talked about Rebecca directly, the wound still tender even after 3 years. Tell me about her, Isabella said gently. What would she have liked about it? Lily looked surprised, then smiled. She always said helping people was the most important thing. When she was sick, even when she felt really bad, she'd still make cookies for the other patients in chemo. She said making someone else smile made her feel better. She sounds wonderful, Isabella said. Maya added, she would have liked you. You're both fighters. Daniel felt tears threaten. His daughters had never talked about Rebecca with Isabella before, had kept that part of their lives separate. This felt like a bridge being built, a connection being acknowledged. I would have been honored to know her, Isabella said, and I'm honored that you're sharing her with me now. Later, after the girls had fallen asleep on the couch watching a movie, Daniel and Isabella stood on the terrace, the city lights twinkling below. Thank you, Daniel said, for what you said about Rebecca, for making the girls feel comfortable talking about her. She's part of your story, Isabella said simply. All of your stories. I'm not trying to replace her or make you forget. I just want to be part of the next chapter. Daniel turned to face her, fully seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. You already are. You have been since that night on the bridge. That feels like a lifetime ago. It was. We're different people now than we were then. Isabella leaned against him, carefully mindful of his shoulder. Better people. Definitely better. Probably happier. certainly more complete. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city sleep below them. Then Isabella's phone buzzed. She looked at it and gasped. "What is it?" Daniel asked, immediately alert. "The first field report. EMTs in Chicago just used Lifeline to save 3 people from a car accident. The EMTs said it made the difference between life and death." Daniel felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying since that night in the river. They'd done it. They'd taken a moment of crisis and transformed it into something that would save countless lives. "We should celebrate," Isabella said. "We are. Every life saved is a celebration." Isabella's phone buzzed again and again. More reports coming in from around the country: Detroit, Phoenix, Miami. Everywhere Lifeline had been deployed, lives were being saved. "It's working," Isabella breathed. "It's really working." Daniel pulled her close with his good arm. "Did you ever doubt it would?" "Every day, right up until now." She looked up at him. "But you never doubted, did you?" "No," Daniel admitted. When you've been at the bottom, when you've lost everything that matters, you learn to recognize real hope when it appears. Lifeline was real from the beginning, just like this. He gestured between them. "Us. Your connection with my daughters. This family we're building." "Family," Isabella repeated, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." A month later, Daniel stood in front of Carter Innovations' annual shareholders meeting. His shoulder had healed enough that he could gesture without wincing, though Isabella still watched him with protective concern. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, looking out at the sea of faces, investors, board members, employees. "6 months ago, I was nobody, a factory worker who took a night shift to make ends meet. Today, I stand before you as proof that innovation doesn't always come from boardrooms or laboratories. Sometimes it comes from desperation. Sometimes it comes from necessity. And sometimes it comes from jumping into a freezing river because it's the right thing to do." He clicked to the first slide showing Lifeline deployment statistics. "In our first month, Lifeline has been used in over 3,000 emergency interventions. The success rate is 94%. That translates to approximately 2,800 lives that might have been lost without this technology." The room erupted in applause, but Daniel wasn't finished. "But numbers don't tell the whole story. Let me introduce you to someone." A young woman walked onto the stage. She was in her 20s, wearing a simple dress and a nervous smile. "This is Jennifer Martinez," Daniel said. 2 weeks ago, her 5-year-old son Marcus was hit by a car while riding his bike. The nearest ambulance was 20 minutes away. Jennifer took the microphone, her voice shaky but determined. "My neighbor had just received Lifeline training at his job. He used it to stop the bleeding, stabilize Marcus's neck, and keep him alive until the paramedics arrived. The doctor said without those interventions, my son would have died." She paused, looking directly at Isabella in the front row. "Miss Carter, Mr. Hayes, everyone who worked on this project, you didn't just save my son, you saved my whole world." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Daniel saw hardened investors dabbing at their faces board members who'd questioned the project's profitability, now understanding its true value. Isabella stood up. "This is why we do what we do. Not for profit margins or market share, but for Marcus Martinez and thousands like him. Lifeline isn't just a product. It's a promise that innovation can serve humanity, that business can have a conscience, that sometimes doing the right thing is also the smart thing." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, at the reception, Daniel found himself cornered by board members who 6 months ago wouldn't have acknowledged his existence. "Remarkable presentation," said William Ashford, the board chairman who'd initially opposed Daniel's hiring. "You've exceeded all expectations." "I had good teacher," Daniel replied, catching Isabella's eye across the room. "The board has been discussing your future with the company," Ashford continued. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position as Vice President of Practical Applications. You'd oversee all field testing and real-world implementation of new technologies." Daniel felt the weight of the offer. A year ago, he would have jumped at it without hesitation. Now he found himself considering more than just salary and title. "I need to discuss it with my family," he said. Ashford looked surprised. "Your family?" "My daughters, and Isabella. We make decisions together now." Understanding dawned in the older man's eyes. "I see. Well, the offer stands. Take your time. That evening, Daniel did exactly what he'd said. He discussed it with his family. They sat around his kitchen table, the same one where he'd once spread out bills he couldn't pay, now covered with Chinese takeout, an opportunity. VP is a big deal, Dad, Maya said. Like huge. But it would mean more hours, Daniel pointed out. More travel, less time with you both. We're not little kids anymore, Maya said, though Lily made a face at this. We can handle it. What do you think? Daniel asked Isabella. She reached across the table, taking his hand. I think you've spent your whole life making decisions based on survival. Maybe it's time to make one based on what you actually want. What I want is complicated, Daniel admitted. I want to keep making a difference. I want to be there for my daughters. He looked at Isabella. I want us to have a future that isn't defined by our jobs. Isabella squeezed his hand. Then we make that happen. All of it. How? By being creative, by setting boundaries, by remembering that we control the technology, not the other way around. She smiled. By being the same people who figured out how to save lives with color-coded medical supplies. Lily had been quiet through the discussion, but now she spoke up. I think you should take it, Dad. But only if they promise you can come to my school play next month. And my science fair, Maya added. And dinner at least 4 nights a week, Isabella said. Daniel looked around the table at these 3 remarkable females who'd somehow become his entire world. You know what those sound like? Perfectly reasonable negotiation points. The next morning, Daniel walked into Ashford's office with a counterproposal. He'd accept the VP position, but with conditions: flexible hours, limited travel, and the ability to work from home when his daughters needed him. He also wanted Isabella to have veto power over any project that would take him away for extended periods. These are unusual terms, Ashford said, reviewing the document. I'm an unusual VP, Daniel replied. I'm also the person who helped turn a failed $40 million project into a product that's going to save thousands of lives while generating hundreds of millions in revenue. Ashford smiled. Point taken. Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Hayes. As Daniel left the office, he found Isabella waiting in the hallway. How did it go? She asked. I'm officially a VP with the most family-friendly contract in corporate history. Isabella kissed him right there in the hallway where anyone could see. My father always said the best negotiations were when everyone got what they needed. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. He would have loved you. She paused. Actually, there's something I want to show you. She led him to a part of the building he'd never visited, the executive archive. Inside were artifacts from the company's history. Early prototypes, photos, documents. Isabella stopped at a display case containing a simple notebook. This was my father's first design journal, she said. He started Carter Innovations with one idea: that technology should make life better for everyone, not just the wealthy. Daniel read the first entry, dated 30 years ago. Today I begin a journey to build something that matters. Not for fame or fortune, but for the grandmother who can't afford hospital care, the child whose parents work 3 jobs, the forgotten and overlooked who deserve just as much chance at life as anyone else. He sounds like someone I know, Daniel said, looking at Isabella. He was a lot like you, actually. Practical, determined, unwilling to accept that things couldn't be better. She opened the case, pulling out the journal. I want you to have this. Isabella, I can't. Yes, you can. You embody everything my father wanted this company to be. Every life Lifeline saves is a fulfillment of his original vision. This belongs with someone who understands that vision in their bones. Daniel took the journal reverently, feeling the weight of legacy in his hands. We should frame the first Lifeline unit next to it. Show the connection between the dream and the reality. That's perfect. Isabella smiled. You know, 6 months ago I was drowning, literally and figuratively. The company was struggling, I was isolated, and I'd lost sight of why any of it mattered. And now I have a partner who reminds me every day that business is just a tool. What matters is what we build with it. She paused. Daniel, I need to tell you something. His stomach clenched. That sounds ominous. No, it's just, I love you. I love your daughters. I love this life we're building together. And I know it's only been 6 months and we're still figuring things out, but Daniel silenced her with a kiss. When they parted, he said, "I love you too. My daughters love you. Even Mrs. Chen loves you, and she doesn't love anyone except her cats." Isabella laughed, the sound echoing through the archive. "So what happens now?" "Now we keep building. Lifeline was just the beginning. There are so many problems to solve, so many people to help. Together. Together." That weekend they held the official Lifeline launch event, not at some fancy hotel, but at the community center in Daniel's old neighborhood. The same place where Rebecca had volunteered, where their daughters had learned to swim, where life had been lived rather than performed. The crowd was diverse investors in suits standing next to factory workers in their best clothes, medical professionals mingling with single parents who understood all too well the importance of accessible emergency care. Daniel stood at the podium, his family, all of them, in the front row. He thought about the journey from that storm-lashed bridge to this moment, about the price of heroism and the rewards of courage. "Every one of us," he began, "has the capacity to save a life. Not through superhuman strength or specialized training, but through the simple act of caring enough to try. Lifeline isn't just a medical device. It's a belief made tangible, the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when given the right tools." He looked at Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. "6 months ago, I made a choice on a bridge. That choice led me here to this moment, surrounded by people who believe that profit and purpose don't have to be enemies, that innovation should serve everyone, not just the privileged few." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Lifeline will save lives. That's what it was designed to do. But my hope is that it does something more, that it reminds us all that we're connected, that a stranger's life has value, that the courage to help is always worth the risk. He paused, finding his daughters' faces in the crowd. "My wife Rebecca used to say that we're all just walking each other home. Some of us take longer paths than others. Some of us need more help along the way. But in the end, we all arrive at the same truth, that love, compassion, and courage are the only things that really matter." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Daniel stepped back from the podium, and Isabella met him there, along with Maya and Lily. They stood together, a family forged in crisis and strengthened by purpose, looking out at a room full of people who believed in the same dream. Later, as the event wound down and the crowd dispersed, Daniel found himself standing outside with Isabella, watching the sun set over the city. "No regrets?" Isabella asked. Daniel thought about his journey from factory worker to executive, from widower to partner, from survival to purpose. Not one. Even the dangerous parts, the getting shot part. Especially those parts. They led us here. Isabella leaned against him. "So what's our next adventure?" Daniel smiled, thinking about the plans forming in his mind, the problems still to solve, the lives still to save. "How about we start with something simple, like revolutionizing emergency medicine worldwide?" "Simple?" Isabella laughed. "I love your definition of simple." A car pulled up, their car now, something they'd bought together, decisions made as a unit rather than individuals. "Dad, are you coming?" Lily called from the window. "We're going to be late for movie night." "Family tradition," Daniel explained to the lingering guests. "Every Saturday, no matter what." As they drove home together, Daniel marveled at how much had changed. The man who jumped into that river had been drowning in his own way, weighted down by grief and financial pressure, and the crushing burden of doing everything alone. But that desperate dive had taught him something crucial. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to save someone else first. In pulling Isabella from that sinking car, he'd pulled himself from a different kind of wreckage. The Lifeline project would go on to become one of the most successful medical devices in history, saving over 1 million lives in its first decade. Daniel would rise to become CEO of Carter Innovations after Isabella stepped back to focus on the charitable foundation they'd build together. Their daughters would grow up to be remarkable women, Maya becoming a doctor who worked in underserved communities, Lily fulfilling her dream of marine biology while developing underwater emergency response systems. But all of that was still to come. In this moment, Daniel Hayes sat in a car with his family, all of his family heading home to watch a movie and eat popcorn and be together. The factory worker who'd become a hero. The hero who'd become an executive. the executive who'd remembered that the only title that really mattered was the one his daughters called him Dad, and somewhere in whatever space the departed inhabit. Rebecca Hayes smiled, knowing that her family had found their way through the storm to a new kind of happiness, built not on forgetting the past, but on honoring it while embracing the future. 6 months had passed since the launch event, and Daniel stood in the boardroom of Carter Innovations facing a crisis he hadn't anticipated. The success of Lifeline had attracted not just acclaim, but also predators, corporate raiders who saw the company's humanitarian focus as a weakness to exploit. "They're offering $40 per share," William Ashford announced to the assembled board. "That's a 60% premium over current market price. Apex Corporation wants to buy us out completely," another board member added. "They're promising to maintain all current employment contracts." Daniel looked at Isabella, who sat at the head of the table with an expression carved from ice. They both knew what Apex really wanted: to shelve Lifeline's affordable distribution model and triple the prices, turning life-saving technology into another profit machine for the wealthy. "The shareholders are pressuring us to consider it," Ashford continued. "We have a fiduciary duty." "We have a moral duty," Cass, Isabella interrupted, "which supersedes any financial obligation." "That's not how business works, Ms. Carter." "Then we change how business works." Isabella stood, her presence filling the room. "My father built this company on principles. I won't sell those principles for any price." "You don't have the votes to stop this," board member Patricia Reeves said gently. "You only control 35% of shares. If the board recommends the sale, then I'll fight it," Isabella said simply, "with everything I have." After the meeting, Daniel found Isabella on the roof garden, the same place where they'd shared their first kiss after Marcus Bellamy's arrest. The city sprawled below them, millions of lives that Lifeline had already touched or would touch in the future. "We can't let them win," Isabella said without turning around. "Apex will destroy everything we've built." "Then we don't let them." Daniel moved beside her. "There has to be a way. I've run the numbers a dozen times. Unless we can find investors willing to back us against the takeover, we're finished. And who's going to invest in principles over profit?" Daniel's phone buzzed. Maya was calling, which was unusual for the middle of a school day. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" "Dad, you need to come to the school now and bring Isabella." "What's wrong?" "What?" "Nothing's wrong. Just trust me. You both need to be here." 20 minutes later, Daniel and Isabella walked into the high school auditorium to find it packed with people. Not just students, but parents, teachers, community members. Maya stood on stage with Lily beside her, both wearing determined expressions that reminded Daniel painfully of their mother. "What is this?" Daniel asked as Maya approached them. "This is us fighting back," Maya said. She handed him a tablet showing a crowdfunding page. "We heard about the takeover attempt. Lily and I started this campaign 3 hours ago." Daniel read the page title, "Save Lifeline, Keep Life-Saving Technology Accessible to All." "Maya, this is sweet, but Apex is offering over $2 billion. "Dad, look at the number." Daniel looked. His heart stopped. In 3 hours, they'd raised $12 million from over 100,000 contributors. "How?" Isabella breathed. "Everyone in this room has a story," Maya said, gesturing to the crowd. "Someone whose life was saved by Lifeline. They're not going to let some corporation steal it away." An elderly man stood up in the front row. "My grandson had an allergic reaction at a playground. Another parent had a Lifeline kit. That $20 device saved his life. I'll mortgage my house before I let Apex triple those prices." A woman in scrubs stood next. "I'm an ER nurse. I've seen what Lifeline can do. My entire unit contributed. We're medical professionals, and we're telling you this technology needs to stay accessible." One by one, people stood and shared their stories. A teacher whose student survived a seizure, a construction worker who saved a colleague from bleeding out, a single mother who used Lifeline when her child choked at a restaurant. "This isn't just about money," Maya said, addressing the crowd. "This is about proving that people power can beat corporate greed, that when we stand together, we're stronger than any raider or hostile takeover." Lily took the microphone. "My mom died of cancer 3 years ago. She would have loved Lifeline not because it could have saved her, but because it saves other people. She always said the best investment was in each other. So we're asking you to invest not in a company, but in a promise. The promise that innovation should serve everyone. The crowd erupted in applause. Daniel felt tears on his face, unashamed of them. His daughters had inherited Rebecca's spirit in ways that continued to amaze him. Isabella stepped forward. If we can raise enough to buy out the wavering shareholders, we can block the takeover. But we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. Then we'd better get started, Maya said. She turned to the crowd. Everyone here tell 5 people. Those 5 tell 5 more. We make this viral. We make it global. We show the world that healthcare isn't just for the rich. The campaign exploded across social media. #Save Lifeline began trending within hours. Videos poured in from around the world, doctors in Africa demonstrating how Lifeline worked in resource-poor settings. Paramedics in Asia crediting it with saving earthquake victims, military medics showing how it revolutionized battlefield medicine. Daniel and Isabella worked around the clock, coordinating with supporters, managing media requests, and trying to counter Apex's increasingly aggressive tactics. The corporate raider responded by launching a smear campaign suggesting Carter Innovations was poorly managed, that the charitable model was unsustainable. They're lying about our financial stability, Isabella said, exhausted after another 18-hour day. They were in Daniel's office, surrounded by laptops and empty coffee cups. Then we tell the truth louder, Daniel replied. We open our books, complete transparency, show everyone exactly where the money goes. That's unprecedented. No corporation reveals that level of detail. We're not just any corporation. We're the company that believes in doing things differently. Isabella studied him, a smile slowly spreading across her face. You know what? You're right. Let's show them everything. The next morning, Carter Innovations did something no major corporation had ever done. They published their complete financial records online. Every expense, every profit margin, every charitable donation laid bare for public scrutiny. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Financial journalists praised the transparency. Ethicists held it up as a model for corporate responsibility. Most importantly, the crowdfunding accelerated. But Apex wasn't finished. 3 days before the shareholder vote, Daniel received a call that chilled him to the bone. Mr. Hayes, the disguised voice said, you have lovely daughters. It would be a shame if something happened to them. Daniel's hand clenched the phone. If you touch them, withdraw your opposition to the sale. Convince Ms. Carter to accept the offer, or Maya and Lily will pay the price. The line went dead. Daniel immediately called Thomas Isabella's security chief, who put protective details on both girls without alerting them to the danger. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He called a press conference. Standing before dozens of reporters with Isabella beside him and his daughters safely in the building behind him, Daniel laid out everything. Apex Corporation just threatened my children's lives to force this sale, he said, his voice steady despite his rage. They think fear will make us surrender. They're wrong. The reporters erupted with questions, but Daniel continued. Every time someone tries to profit from human suffering, they count on our silence, our fear, our willingness to protect ourselves rather than stand up for what's right. Today that ends. Isabella took the microphone. We're filing criminal charges against Apex Corporation. We're also announcing that regardless of the board vote, I will never allow this company to be sold to anyone who would restrict access to life-saving technology. How can you stop it if the board votes to sell? A reporter asked. Isabella smiled, but it was sharp as a blade. Because as of this morning, we've raised enough through crowdfunding to match Apex's offer. Not from one corporate raider, but from 5 million individual contributors around the world. The number stunned even Daniel. 5 million people, averaging $400 each, had contributed $2 billion to save Lifeline. It was unprecedented, impossible, and absolutely real. William Ashford stood up in the crowd of reporters. Daniel hadn't even noticed him there. Ms. Carter, Mr. Hayes, the board met in an emergency session this morning. In light of the public support and the criminal threats from Apex, we're rejecting the takeover unanimously. The room exploded in chaos, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, phones ringing. Through it all, Daniel held Isabella's hand, their daughters rushing on stage to embrace them both. We did it, Maya whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Daniel corrected. You and Lily, you mobilized the world. We learned from the best. Lily said, looking between Daniel and Isabella. Both of you. The celebration was short-lived. That evening, as they gathered at Isabella's penthouse to decompress, Agent Morrison arrived with troubling news. Apex's CEO, Richard Stone, has disappeared. Our sources suggest he's fled the country, but he left something behind, evidence of a larger conspiracy. Morrison laid out documents on the coffee table. Stone wasn't working alone. There's a network of corporations systematically targeting companies with humanitarian missions. They buy them, strip them of their charitable components, and maximize profits. How many companies? Isabella asked. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Medical devices, affordable housing initiatives, educational technology, anything that prioritizes access over profit. Daniel studied the documents, his mind already working through possibilities. So stopping the Apex takeover was just the beginning. I'm afraid so, Morrison confirmed. Stone had partners, and they're not going to stop just because one attempt failed. After Morrison left, the family sat in silence for a moment. Then Maya spoke up. We need to build a coalition, companies like ours working together to protect each other. A mutual defense pact for humanitarian corporations, Isabella mused. It could work. It has to work, Daniel said, because what we've built here, it's bigger than just Lifeline now. We've proven that people will fight for accessible health care, for corporate responsibility for each other. We can't let that momentum die. Over the next weeks, they did exactly that. The Humanitarian Business Alliance started with 5 companies and grew to 50 within a month. Each company pledged to support the others against hostile takeovers, to maintain transparent pricing, and to ensure their innovations remained accessible. Daniel found himself traveling, constantly speaking at conferences, meeting with CEOs who wanted to join the alliance. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. For the first time since Rebecca's death, he felt like he was part of something larger than survival. One evening, returning from a trip to Seattle, he found Isabella waiting in his office with an odd expression. What's wrong? He asked immediately. Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right. She handed him a tablet showing medical test results. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Daniel stared at the results, then at Isabella, then back at the results. Pregnant, he repeated, as if saying it would make it more real. 8 weeks. I just found out today. Isabella's voice was uncertain. I know we haven't discussed this, and with everything happening with the company. Daniel kissed her, cutting off her words. When they parted, both were crying. Really? He asked. Really? We're having a baby. We're having a baby. Daniel pulled her close, his mind spinning with joy and terror in equal measure. What about the company, the alliance, your work? We'll continue, Isabella said firmly. Plenty of CEOs have babies. I'll just be doing it with more style. My daughters. Already know. I told them first. I hope that's okay. I wanted to make sure they were comfortable before... What did they say? Isabella smiled. Maya started researching the best prenatal vitamins, and Lily asked if she could name the baby. They're thrilled, Daniel. They want this as much as we do. That evening, they gathered the girls for a family dinner. The conversation was a whirlwind of baby names, nursery designs, and debates about whether a spring or summer baby was better. You know this changes everything, Maya said, practical, as always. Everything's been changing since Dad jumped in that river, Lily pointed out. This is just another adventure. The best adventure? Daniel said, looking at his growing family. The pregnancy progressed alongside the company's evolution. As Isabella's belly grew, so did the Humanitarian Business Alliance. They faced constant challenges, legal battles with corporations trying to circumvent their protections, political pressure from lobbying groups, media attacks funded by their opponents. But they also celebrated victories. Lifeline received FDA approval for an advanced version that could perform basic surgical procedures. The alliance helped 3 member companies fight off hostile takeovers. The crowdfunding model they'd pioneered became a standard tool for protecting humanitarian businesses. Daniel stood in the delivery room 7 months later, holding Isabella's hand as she brought their son into the world. They named him Thomas after Isabella's father, with Rebecca as his middle name. Thomas. Rebecca Hayes Carter, a bridge between past and future. He's perfect, Isabella whispered, exhausted but radiant. He's ours. Daniel replied, marveling at the tiny fingers that gripped his with surprising strength. Maya and Lily met their brother with a mixture of awe and determination. "We'll teach him everything," Lily declared. "How to be brave like Dad, smart like Isabella, and kind like Mom was." "He's lucky," Maya said softly, "to be born into a family that knows how to fight for what matters." The media attention was overwhelming. The baby born from the union of the factory worker turned executive and the CEO who'd revolutionized emergency medicine became a symbol of hope of what was possible when different worlds came together for a common purpose. But for Daniel, sitting in the hospital room with his complete family, the symbolism didn't matter. What mattered was Isabella sleeping peacefully after her ordeal, Maya reading to baby Thomas from a medical textbook. "It's never too early to start learning," she insisted, and Lily carefully painting the baby's tiny fingernails with non-toxic polish because he should look nice for his first photos. 3 years passed in a blur of growth, both corporate and personal. Thomas grew from a baby to a toddler with his father's determination and his mother's brilliant green eyes. Maya graduated as valedictorian and started pre-med at Johns Hopkins with a full scholarship from the Carter Foundation. Lily entered high school with dreams of combining marine biology with emergency medicine underwater ambulances, she called them, and nobody laughed because they'd learned that impossible dreams had a way of becoming reality in the Hayes-Carter family. Carter Innovations went public with a unique structure that prevented any hostile takeover while maintaining their humanitarian mission. The initial public offering raised $3 billion, all reinvested in expanding Lifeline's reach to developing nations. Daniel, now CEO, after Isabella stepped back to focus on the foundation and their growing family, stood before the United Nations General Assembly, invited to speak about the revolution in humanitarian business. 5 years ago, he began looking out at delegates from nearly 200 countries. "I was a factory worker worried about paying my electric bill. Today, I stand here as proof that transformation is possible, not just personal transformation, but systemic change in how we think about business, about innovation, about our obligations to each other." He clicked to show a world map, dots of light indicating every place Lifeline had been deployed. The map was almost entirely illuminated. Lifeline has now saved over 1 million lives, not in wealthy hospitals or elite medical centers, but in refugee camps, rural villages, inner-city schools, and yes, on bridges in storms when strangers choose to help strangers. The assembly was silent, captivated. But Lifeline isn't the real innovation. The real innovation is proving that companies can be both profitable and principled, that success doesn't require sacrificing conscience, that when we trust people to support what's right, they will rise to meet that trust. He paused, seeing Isabella in the gallery with Thomas on her lap, Maya and Lily beside them all, watching with pride. "My late wife Rebecca used to say that we're all just walking each other home. The Humanitarian Business Alliance now includes 300 companies across 40 countries, all committed to walking that path together. We're proving that capitalism doesn't have to be predatory, that innovation can serve everyone, that the future belongs not to those who extract value, but to those who create it." The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Later at the reception, Daniel found himself on a balcony overlooking the East River. The same water that had nearly claimed Isabella's life 5 years ago now reflected the lights of a city transformed in small ways by their work. "Proud of yourself?" Isabella asked, joining him with Thomas sleeping in her arms. "Proud of us," Daniel corrected. "All of us." "Dad?" Lily rushed onto the balcony, phone in hand. "You're trending worldwide. Everyone's sharing your speech." "More importantly," Maya added, "following her sister, Johns Hopkins wants to implement your distributed emergency response system campus-wide. They're calling it the Hayes Protocol." Daniel laughed. 6 years ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this." 6 years ago, you were a different person," Isabella said. "We all were." "No," Daniel said thoughtfully. "We were the same people. We just hadn't been tested yet. That night on the bridge didn't change who I was, it revealed it." "Philosophy from a CEO?" Isabella teased. "Philosophy from a father," Daniel corrected, gathering his family close. "Everything I've learned, everything we've built, comes down to a simple truth that Rebecca knew, and that jumping into that river taught me the only real wealth is in what we give, not what we keep. Thomas stirred in Isabella's arms, opening green eyes that matched his mother's. He reached for Daniel, who took him carefully, still amazed by the trust in those tiny hands. "So what's next?" Lily asked. "What's the next impossible thing we're going to make possible?" Daniel looked at his family, the daughters who'd supported him through the darkest times, the woman who'd given him a second chance at love, the son who represented hope for the future and felt the presence of Rebecca in all of it, her spirit living on in the values they carried forward. "Whatever it is, Jimo," he said, "we'll face it together. That's the only strategy that's never failed us." The moon rose over New York City, the same moon that had witnessed a desperate rescue on a stormy night 5 years ago. But tonight, it shone on a family that had transformed tragedy into triumph, loss into purpose, a single act of courage into a global movement. Inside the reception world, leaders and business moguls waited to hear more about the Hayes-Carter vision for humanitarian capitalism. But out on the balcony, Daniel Hayes stood with his family, holding his son, while his daughters debated whether underwater ambulances were actually feasible, and Isabella outlined plans for the Foundation's next initiative. They were no longer drowning, no longer just surviving. They were thriving, building, creating a world where every person had access to the tools they needed to save themselves and others. The bridge that had brought them together had become a foundation for countless other bridges, connecting humanity in ways that stock prices could never measure. "Mom would be so proud," Maya said softly, and they all knew she was right. Rebecca Hayes had died believing in the power of love and compassion to change the world. Her husband and daughters had taken that belief and made it manifest, proving that sometimes the poorest among us possess the richest hearts, that heroes don't wear capes but work uniforms, and that the greatest fortune isn't in what we accumulate, but in the lives we transform. The city lights twinkled below them like stars brought to earth, each one representing a life that might be saved, a family that might be preserved, a future that might be brighter. Because 5 years ago, a factory worker chose to stop on a bridge and dive into dark water to save a stranger. That stranger was no longer strange, that darkness had given way to light, and that dive had become an ascent that lifted not just 2 people but millions around the world, who now had access to life-saving technology they could afford. Daniel kissed his son's forehead, felt Isabella's hand slip into his, heard his daughters laughing about something on Maya's phone, and knew with absolute certainty that Rebecca was right. They were all just walking each other home. And what a beautiful, purposeful, meaningful walk it had become. The end. But really, it was just the beginning, because every life saved by Lifeline would create ripples touching other lives, inspiring other acts of courage, proving again and again that the best investment isn't in portfolios or profits, but in each other. The Hayes-Carter family had learned that lesson in the most dramatic way possible, and they would spend the rest of their lives teaching it to others, one saved life at a time.